Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto mind broken when his family abandoned him. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. This was ridiculous. He was Kurama the Kyuubi, being more powerful than any. Save the human called the Six-Path Sage. He had crushed the pathetic boy he lived inside's soul and devoured it when the brat was 7. Learning the truth about his family had been the break he had needed to kill the flesh bag he was stuck inside. Even chained as he was, Kurama could feel a smile come to his face. No. It was not his face but that wretched boy's. He wondered what Naruto's last moments were like. Knowing that his father and mother had abandoned him, taking his twin sister with them, it mattered not, the boy was dead. The beast inhabiting the body of the boy let out a howl of rage. Yes, the boy was dead, and he had been so careful too. Always acting the fool, acting just like a despicable human. While he tried to find a way out of this fleshy prison he found himself in. It had been going so well too, he was so close to being free he could taste it. Then that damn Uchiha had to defect and send everything straight to hell. Kurama was forced to play the role of concerned friend and chase him down. It was maddening. The boy was an Uchiha, he needed to die, and he, the greatest of the nine-tailed beasts, was forced to bring him back in order to escape. He failed. Naturally, the pathetic humans had given him no training in their pitiful techniques, and the body he was inhabiting was incapable of using his Yuki properly. When he returned, he had been chained and told he would be executed, by the Fleshbag's family no less. Kurama had to laugh at that. Naruto's family could have saved him, if they had just returned and shown him affection. Kurama would never have broken free. He would tell that to the Yondaime and that bitch Kushina before this body died. He would let them know of their own failure. It would be priceless to see their tortured expressions as they found out that they caused their own son's death. He could picture it now. They would cry and beg forgiveness for their sins, and Kurama would say in Naruto's voice that he would never forgive them. Let them be tortured by their own misdeeds for the remainder of their pitiful mortal lives. The door opened and a redhead he knew more than passably well walked inside. Enjoying your last days, Kyuubi? Kushina spat out at the monster wearing the body of her son. He laughed. It really was too funny. Yes, indeed, I am, my dear former container. The boy was really quite spirited, at least until he was 7. He smiled at her, displaying his overly large canine teeth. Kushina looked at him suspiciously. What the hell do you mean, Kyuubi? The redhead growled out. He smiled, so easily predictable was his former container. He smiled at the redhead. I would have thought that would be obvious, Kushina-chan. Kurama said slyly. The redhead walked up and slapped him across the face. Before ripping off the pendant from around his neck, that accursed pendant, he had no idea why he had bothered to win it off the pathetic human it formerly belonged to. He just called it a misplaced whim. Don't you dare call me that, you have no right. The redhead spat at him. He smiled. Oh, I have every right to call you that, don't I, Ka-chan? Kurama said in his Naruto voice. Kushina flinched when she heard that voice, causing the mildly amused demon to smile wider. As for what I meant, I would have thought it would have been obvious at this point. I did not take control of this body until he was 7. Kushina looked on at him, horror and disbelief clear in her eyes. Oh yes, he was quite the child. The orphanage matron would often beat him while telling him that you abandoned him and left him unloved because he was a monster, you know. Kurama let out a dark chuckle at that. While horror and slow and agonizing understanding was dawning on Kushina's face, it intoxicated him. He would always shout back that his Tu-san and Ka-chan loved him and were dead but still watching over him. His belief never wavered, you know? She once cut out his tongue when he refused to stop saying that. I grew it back though, and you know what? He was still admit that his Ka-chan loved him. I think that was the only thing that was keeping me at bay, his belief that you loved him. He laughed harder at the look of comprehension on her face as the horror of what she had done crashed down on Kushina. It looks like you're starting to understand, are you not, Kushina-chan? Kurama grinned a little wider at the tears that were beginning to form in Kushina's eyes. Then when he was 7 he went to that old monkey's office. He had just gotten out of hospital, you see, and wanted someone to talk to. While he was there he found the letter you left when you abandoned him. You should have seen his face. It was priceless. His world came crashing down around him as he found out that not only did the village hate him but so did his own mother. He laughed at the tears now falling down the woman's face. It broke his mind, you know. the fox said in a conversational tone, still trying to get his laughter under control. I dragged him into the mindscape when that happened. The seal that had miraculously held and would keep on holding because of his belief that you loved him shattered and I was free. I devoured him and took this body for my own. The demon fox laughed harder as sobs began racking Kushina's frame. His last words were hilarious though, even with his mind broken as I devoured him. His last words were so funny. Despite knowing you hated him, Naruto's last words were to you, Kushina. He laughed harder at the look of utter devastation on the woman's face. Everything had just aligned in Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina's head. The seal had held until her baby was 7 and the abandonment of his family broke him. He was devoured by the fox not because he was too young or the seal was weak like Minato and her were told he would be by Hiruzen. But because he couldn't bear the hatred anymore, because of her. His last words, Kushina-chan. The fox said in a glee-filled tone, looking at the woman's broken expression. Where are you, Ka-san? Why did you leave me alone? I thought you loved me? Right before I tore him to pieces. It was so funny. He knew you hated him and yet he still asked for your love as he died. Come on, Kushina-chan, that is irony at its finest. The redhead ran from the cell trying to escape the demon's laughter. Neither Kurama or her noticed the pendant still gripped in her hand glow for a brief second. XXX. The next few days were nowhere as amusing for the great demon. The cursed Yondaime had come to see him and hit him for causing pain to his beloved wife with his lies. The look on the bastard's face had been priceless when he checked the seal and found that Kurama had been telling the truth. The bond bastard had tears streaming down his face. Epically when he realized if his family had just been there for his son, Naruto would never have been devoured. The look of utter hopelessness on the man's face as tears streamed down it from the revelation would arguably be the best revenge Kurama would ever have on anyone. The flesh bag's twin had come to see him after her father had told her what would have happened if they had stayed. She spent hours trying to bring her brother back to the surface. He laughed in her face and told her the same story as Kushina. He thought it almost broke the brat. Almost being the keyword. It seemed like he wouldn't be seeing that intoxicating look of despair on any human's face again before he died. Too bad. Kurama was hauled in chains to the execution block. He couldn't break free permanently. No, he was going to die here. But he could still kill Uzumaki Kushina. The woman was still unbalanced from his earlier revelations. The damned Yondaime, not so much. The cuffs on his hand were restricting his chakra. He would need to wait for the moment the Yondaime went to kill him. He would have to attack Kushina at that very instant. Kurama grimaced. He could fuse his Yuki to this body for a grand total of 20 minutes. He would have a mere 20 minutes to kill as many ninja as possible. The demon looked over the crowd. He could see the hatred plain on the faces of many. That pathetic human Hinata that he had manipulated into loving him looked heartbroken. Stupid bitch couldn't even tell when she was being played. He noticed that Kakashi and Sakura had smiles on their faces. Kurama grimaced. He thought Hitaki knew there was something off about him. Still, his tiny revenge on the village would be more than enough. People of Konoha, after today you will have no more fear. Today the monster that took so many of our loved ones and the body of my son will die. The Yondaime proclaimed proudly, causing a mass amount of cheering to erupt from the crowd. They couldn't see the tears of shame flowing down their leader's face, his wife's or his daughter's. The Yondaime took a step back and faced Kurama. Chakras swirled above his hand, concentrating and spinning, forming a Rasengan. Kurama looked at the sphere impassively, but inside he was judging exactly when to move. The Rasengan closed and momentarily breaking the seals on his handcuffs, the ancient demon moved, channeling his Yuki into his body. Forcing it to change, his Yuki exploded around him into a pillar of red light. Minato jumped back. Shit, this was not part of the plan. The red light died down and in his son's body's place stood a demon. Elongated jaw like a fox. The bones of his face actually ripping his skin open to form a sick parody of a fox's maw. Twin fox ears were atop his head, both made of bone. The hands had no flesh remaining on them, merely bone covered in his Yuki, and 9 flowing tails made of bone extending from his backside. Kurama excluded more of his Yuki and the skin of his forearm split open and bone descended, forming a sick mockery of a sword, one that was quickly grasped by his right hand. The fox smiled, before jumping at Kushina, blade leading a sick grin twisting his face. The pendant around her neck began to shine like a miniature sun and the sword of bone was stopped by a sword as black as midnight. The plaza went silent. The man was tall and looked no older than 14. His hair was golden blonde and reached to the back of his neck, leaving some of his bangs to fall near his eyes. Tan skin but not too dark, a rounded face slightly like Kushina's own. Ocean blue eyes looked into Kurama's silted red ones. The man smiled, as he pushed on his blade, sending the demon flying backwards through the opposing building. He walked forward, black hakama pants slightly ripped around his ankles, making a swishing sound as he walked forward. His upper body was covered in a black overcoat, it only had a left sleeve. His right was cut off, a chain wrapped around his right arm ending over his shoulder. The man's katana was literally fused to his right hand by some kind of black glove. He was smirking at the wall he had just sent Kurama through. The demon jumped out of the wreckage of the house and sprinted forward, jumping and spinning in the air, bring his sword down on the head of one he could only call his fated enemy. "What are you doing here?" The Demon King growled out. The man smirked. "Why, I'm sure I have no idea what you mean." The swordsman responded, still smirking. Kurama trembled with rage. "No idea, no idea. No idea my ass, I devoured you when you were 7, you little shit." Kurama stuck forward. The man closed, allowing them to come to a weapon lock. "Why are you even helping these people? You should hate them." The man looked at him quizzically. "Hate them? Who said I didn't already?" he asked, before his smirk turned to a grimace as he tried to overpower his opponent. "It's just I hate you a whole lot more than I hate them, that's all. I've had 7 years to think about it, and I think I'll hear them out before I just go on a killing spree." The fox pushed harder against the weapon. The blonde swordsman pushed the demon's blade off to the side and gripped his head, before throwing Kurama through a nearby building. The fox pulled himself out of the wall. Damn you straight to hell, Namikaze Naruto." The crowd was still silent. Tears were welling up in the Namikaze family's eyes. "Sochike-kun?" Kushina ventured and quickly found the point of a black katana against her throat. "Don't you dare call me that. You have no right to call me that." Naruto hissed out. "I will hear your excuses later. Right now I have to deal with him, but mark my words. If you call me that again, I will cut your tongue right out of your mouth." He finished in a deathly quiet tone. Kushina and her family flinched at his tone, but it was understandable. His body wasn't taken over until he was 7, and it could have been prevented if they just came back and looked at the seal. If they just loved him. Naruto turned his attention back to Kyuubi. "Well then, I'm guessing neither of us have the strength to keep this up much longer, so what do you say we wrap it up?" Kurama nodded and began gathering black positive chakra and white negative chakra. Naruto placed his left hand on his black gauntlet. Black and blue energy exploded around him, rolling off him in waves. The energy was pushed away, his hair was longer and black. Most of his body was covered in gray bandages. Darkness rolled off his right arm, eyes were now blood red. The ball in front of Kyuubi finished charging. The Demon King swallowed it and stared at Naruto with hatred. They pulled back a black katana forming in Naruto's right hand. Mugetsu. Bijuudama. The attacks were loosed, clashing together and struggling for dominance. Each refusing to back down, each refusing to surrender. The black light of Mugetsu grew in power until it overpowered the Bijuudama, obliterating the Naruto's demonized body and more than a third of Konoha before continuing on and destroying much of the countryside. The black light receded and Naruto looked at the place his body used to be. He gave the spot Kyuubi last was, a lazy wave. Mugetsu is an attack that returns all to nothing. Like watching the wind pass, all one has time to do is feel before they are turned to dust. Naruto said somewhat sadly. The bandages around his body turned to dust and blew away in the wind. He sighed and walked back to Kushina, who was looking at him with a small mixture of both awe and trepidation. Naruto looked at her, his face blank, betraying nothing, but his eyes were a raging vortex of pain and rage. "I will hear your reasons later. That attack takes a lot out of me and I will need to rest. I will drag you into the mindscape when I am ready to talk." Naruto reached out and Kushina flinched, thinking he was going to strike her. Not that he didn't have due cause to do so, she admitted. To her surprise, he simply touched the necklace of the first Hokage before dissolving into blue particles and being absorbed into it. Silence reigned in Konoha for a good 5 minutes before Kakashi asked the one question on everyone's mind. What the hell just happened?" Naruto sighed, leaning back on a large tree. Now this was the life. He knew he had made a good choice influencing the fox to make that bet for the old hag's necklace. Originally he had just thought that with the self-replenishing chakra of the Shodem inside he would be able to graft his consciousness and skills to the gem, coming out every now and then for an amusement, after the necklace was safely away from the fox of course. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that the mindscape or whatever it was inside the gem would resemble a giant forest. Beautiful lakes, streams and giant trees, after watching the Chunin exams through the fox's eyes. Naruto realized the mindscape was an exact replica of the Forest of Death, minus the deadly animals. Still, that made for a great place to relax. He grimaced. That little stunt with Mugistu was going to set him back. He would need at least 3 days before he could pull anyone into the mindscape and a week before he could manifest outside, if he wanted to fight someone that was. He could still manifest himself outside of the gem, just not with any combat capabilities. That annoyed him. He heard a crunch from behind him and smiled. "Well, how are you today?" he asked, not turning around. He knew her well enough. After all, she was the only reason he was still sane. He would have gone over the edge a long time ago if not for her. He heard her giggle, a magical sound. Exactly like birds singing, he loved it. "So tell me, did you manage to get outside?" she asked playfully. Naruto smirked and nodded, not bothering to turn around. "You were right, you know, my family were the ones that came back to execute me." The word family was dripping with sarcasm. He could feel her wince at his tone and felt remorse. He knew she wanted him to give them a second chance and his attitude would only be a deterrent to that. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Naruto was off his tree branch so fast it seemed like he had teleported, wrapping her in a hug. "Don't you say that, you've done nothing to apologize for." Naruto pulled back and looked at the girl. She was beautiful, long red hair, brown eyes and cream-colored skin without a single blemish. "Now I can keep my promise to you," Naruto added, smiling. The woman smiled back, before giving him a light hit to the head. "Yep, don't forget I'm in Yuki no Kuni, so hurry up and save me already," she said, pouting before her body began to fade. "I look forward to seeing you for the first time in person, Naruto." She didn't use his last name. "And you, Scarlet Erza." Ezra faded and he was left alone. Naruto shrugged and returned to his tree branch, wondering when his friend would visit again. Before deciding he could use a little amusement and opened his mind, allowing him to hear voices outside of his home, prison. He was slightly annoyed when he heard Erza's voice again. "Whatever you say, Mr. Fullbringer." Naruto sighed. He hated it when she got the last word in. XXX. Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina was almost paralyzed with fear. Her son was alive, in a way, and he was pissed. Not that he didn't have a right to be, but still she was scared. Naruto, her Naruto, had every right to reject her and never want anything to do with her or her family, and she couldn't fault him for it if he did. Kushina had been heartbroken when she was told that the seal on her son had partially failed and his mind would be taken over by the fox. She had broken down and cried, even falling into depression for over a year. When Minato and she had checked the seal, they had found that the Sandaime was right. The seal had partially failed. Whoever constructed it had linked the part of the seal that held the fox back to the container's will rather than the container's mental state. No baby could hold back the will of a Biju, or so they believed, and so she thought her son was lost. She just couldn't live in Konoha after that. It simply caused Minato and her too much pain. That was the reason her family and she left Konoha, taking Naruto's sister Kasumi with them. They simply couldn't take living near what they believed to be a mockery of her child. Hiruzen had talked them out of killing him, saying that even broken the seal would still need 14 years to completely integrate the Kyuubi and Naruto's souls. If what they believed to be a monster in her son's body were killed before that time, the Kyuubi would be free again and reform in 4 years. The old former Hokage had convinced Minato and her to at least let her child's sacrifice mean something. If the monster inside her child's body were killed at 14, then it would take 100 years to reform. They had agreed, albeit reluctantly, before leaving Konoha, and now? Now she found that she could have her child back. She could have the baby she thought she lost back, and there was a very good chance he hated her. What could she say to him when they finally spoke? "Naruto, I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for not being there for you, for leaving you in a village who wanted nothing more than for you to die a painful death. But if you would give me the chance, I would like to finally be your mother." Yeah, she was sure that would go over well. He would probably put his katana through her if she said that. She wasn't wrong. Kushina sighed and looked out over the Namikaze estate and Konoha, a giant gash from Naruto's attack still easily visible. That was it, all this waiting was doing her head in. Kushina needed to get out of the village for a little while, not long, but a little while. The red-headed Namikaze matriarch stalked into the home's armory. It was by no means a large affair, but more than adequate to the family's needs. She pulled out her old Anbu armor and strapped it on, securing her ninjutsu over her right shoulder. Kushina took a deep breath and walked back to her bedroom, picking up the necklace that Naruto disappeared into and placing it around her neck. Kushina wasn't sure if Naruto was actually inside the necklace or not, but she did suspect that he was. That raised another question that she wanted answered. What was her son now? His body was dead and yet he was still alive. Was he a chakra construct like the Biju? Or was he something else altogether? Kushina pushed the thought from her mind. Regardless, he was her son, the child she had abandoned. Kushina's heart clenched at that thought. She shook the thought off. She needed to be focused for this, but her thoughts kept going back to her child. Naruto, I'm sorry. Kushina murmured almost silently before using a shunshin to go to Tsunade's office. Not knowing Naruto had heard her little confession, he was still angry at his family beyond all belief. But maybe Erza's idea of giving them a second chance was worth more than he thought. The woman did seem to be genuinely resourceful for her actions. Either way, if the woman wanted forgiveness, she would have to earn it. He was not the type to give out second chances after all. Kushina appeared in Tsunade's office just as the Hokage was about to give an extended mission out to the new Team 7. Consisting of Kakashi, Sakura, Sai and her daughter Kasumi, from within the gem Naruto took his first look at his twin. She was easy on the eyes, he would give her that. An hourglass-like figure, long legs, perky C-cup breasts, he slapped himself. Why the hell was he checking out his own sister? Kasumi had black ninja sandals on her feet, metal leg guards until just below her knee. A short red skirt with tight shorts on underneath them. An orange belt holding 4 sealing scrolls sat securely around her hips. Red shirt with a black shoulder guard on her left arm and a ninjutsu over her right shoulder. Red hair in a tight ponytail, violet eyes and a rounded face. What are you doing here, Ka-san? Kasumi asked, cocking her head to the side in a confused manner. Kushina smiled at her daughter's actions. Well, Masumi, I've been getting a little stir-crazy recently, so I thought I might take some missions to unwind. Kushina answered, a small smile still gracing her face. Tsunade looked through her mission documents. Well, I have got a few things that would get you out of the village, she admitted, before sighing and rubbing her forehead. But there's not much. You've got a bandit camp elimination, an escort mission to Nami no Kuni, or you can help your daughter's team. Tsunade finished lamely. Kasumi shook her head empathetically. Oh no, she is not coming, no way no how. I want to prove I can stand on my own. The fiery redhead stated, making a crossing motion with her arms. Tsunade chuckled. Well then, Kushina, guess you're going to have to take a different mission then. The redhead nodded, looking amused at her daughter's antics. I'll take the escort mission, but out of interest, what mission are you doing, Masumi? Kushina asked, smiling at her child. Kasumi's face lit up with a small fangirl grin. Naruto cursed his luck from within the gem. We're going to escort the actress Yuki Fujikaze to Yuki no Kuni, great huh? We start in 2 weeks. Kasumi shouted. Naruto was only half listening until he heard the words Yuki no Kuni. That was it, he had to get the gem and by extension himself on that mission, consequences be damned. Naruto exerted his power outside of the gem, forcing the Riryoku to take shape. Then hardening it to form a body. His body, it would set him back a few more days of rest, but he needed to be on that mission. The 6 people looked on in fascination as a blue aura gathered around the gem. Kushina looked down as it began shining. At first it was just a small glow, but it slowly grew larger and larger until it was shining like the sun. His body began forming. Naruto noticed he had different clothes now. Not that it surprised him, the entire outfit he had worn when fighting against Kyuubi had all been part of his Bankai. Naruto cracked his neck from side to side before looking down at his new outfit, black sneakers and pants, white shirt with orange trim and a black vest. He could work with this. Naruto stretched, ignoring the looks from the others and turning to Tsunade. Old hag, I want in on that mission to Yuki. Needless to say, Tsunade was not happy about Naruto's blatant disrespect. Watch your mouth, brat. The Sannin growled out, surely it wouldn't kill him to show a little respect. And why should I? Naruto asked, his voice laced with contempt. Thanks to you and those who could be called my family, I was condemned to 7 years of hell. Following that, I almost had my soul devoured by Kyuubi, and it all could have been avoided if my so-called family was there for me. Naruto pointedly ignored the look of shame on the Sannin's face as well as the tears on Kushina's and Kasumi's. But enough of that, I will be on this mission to Yuki, old hag, one way or the other. Sakura was the first to regain her voice. Who do you think you are talking to Tsunade-sama like that? The pink howler monkey yelled, sounding something akin to a banshee's wail. Naruto didn't bother responding. Instead, merely walking to Sakura and picking her up by the throat, tightening his grip so that the Haruno was having her air cut off. Who do I think I am? Naruto asked, amusement clear in his tone, before tightening his grip further, causing Sakura's legs to flail around uselessly in a vain attempt to kick him. I think I am the man that has the power to destroy this village at any time he chooses. Remember that before you speak to your betters, girl. Naruto drew his arm back and threw her at a wall. Luckily for Sakura, Kakashi caught her before she impacted. The copy ninja was watching Naruto wearily. This was not the Kyuubi that Muchi accepted, but he sure as hell was not friendly either. Naruto turned to face the copy ninja. Hitaki, I suggest you keep your pet on a leash, before I choose to put it out of my misery. The people in the room flinched at the cold and impersonal tone Naruto used. Now then, back to business. Old hag, I need you to assign Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina to the Yuki mission. Since she holds my gem, I need her to go. Tsunade smiled. It seemed like she finally had some leverage over the wild card. And why should I send her? After all, Kushina is a valuable ninja and I could use her elsewhere. So pray tell, why should I do as you wish? Tsunade said, smirking, an action Naruto mirrored before snapping his fingers. Kushina screamed in pain and fell to the floor panting. Naruto fixed Tsunade with a glare. If looks could kill the slug, Sannin would be ash. I wasn't asking you to place her on the Yuki mission, I was giving you an order. If you failed to comply. Naruto snapped his fingers again and Kushina cried out in pain. Kasumi ran over to her mother and hugged her. Please stop this, Oni-san. Naruto let up on the pain he was giving to the red-headed Namikaze. As I said, if you failed to comply, I will crush her mind and turn her into my thrall. Then use her as transportation to get to Yuki, and I can promise you if I do that it is irreversible. The occupants in the room looked at him in horror. Naruto shrugged. He couldn't actually do that, of course. The best he could do was give her a really bad migraine and then aggravate it, like he had just done. But he was willing to bet they didn't know that. Tsunade sighed. This was bad, she really thought she had some leverage over him. Fine, but why do you want to go to Yuki? Naruto smiled. Victory was his. To help a friend. Naruto walked back to Kushina, who was still panting, and touched the necklace. You are not at all how I thought you would be, Naruto. Tsunade said, sounding sad. I honestly thought that the mask Kyuubi put up when I first met your body was whatever was left of your personality. Naruto gave a brief and cold laugh. Of course I'm different. After all, the Uzumaki Naruto you knew never existed to begin with. Naruto disappeared in a swirl of blue light, retreating into the necklace, leaving behind a very shaken and somewhat saddened room. 2 weeks later. From within the gem, Naruto could feel the ship pass into the lands of Yuki no Kuni and smiled. In the capital city of Yuki no Kuni, in a hidden lab deep beneath the earth, lay a young woman. Pale and unhealthy white skin, the result of being inside almost her whole life. Limp red hair and dirty from lack of attention. The girl was hooked up to a multitude of medical equipment inside a medically induced coma, that she was removed from once a week for some exercise. She normally would have been used as a breeding factory by now, but the scientists didn't want to risk her, at least not yet. Erza's breathing quickened and her eyes opened, showing them to be brown and full of life. She smiled at the ceiling, a warm feeling suffusing her chest like molten gold. For the first time outside of the mindscape, she felt happy, warm and safe. Before uttering the 3 words she had wanted to say for almost 7 years. He's finally here. Naruto sighed from within the gem. Stupid fucking director, stupid fucking iceberg, stupid fucking Fujikaze Yuki. Couldn't they tell their little side trips were holding him up? Naruto needed to get to the capital and fast. He did not want to spend the next few days playing film crew with the little self-absorbed drama queen. It did nothing but annoy him, but if nothing else Naruto was a realist, it was the team's job and by extension Kushina's. He refused to call her mother, to be where the little drama queen was. That however did not mean he couldn't feel angry about it, stupid spoiled bitch. Naruto pushed his vision outwards allowing him to see what Kushina saw, yep nothing new. Just the damn film crew setting up for their shitty movie on some god-forsaken iceberg. Who the hell in their right goddamn minds filmed on a freaking iceberg? He sighed again, he just needed to have some patience. Waiting was something Naruto was more than accustomed to. After all he had waited a little over 7 years for his revenge on Kurama, he could feel his hatred for that bastard burning within him even now. He took a deep breath, that hate was not going to help him now. Naruto spread out his awareness again absorbing the lay of the land and the location of the film crew, via piggybacking off Kushina's senses. That was the first useful skill he had learned when that bastard Kurama came into possession of the Shodem's necklace, the ability to share another's senses without them noticing. Still it wasn't as vivid as actually being outside of the gem, but he needed his strength. Naruto thought about that for a second, it was getting easier and easier to maintain a body outside of the gem. But what did that mean? Could he actually live on inside that body, or was he just extending the amount of time he could spend outside the gem? Naruto pushed the thought aside, he would deal with it when the gem was safely in Erza's hands. The blonde sighed, oh dear Kami was he bored, he felt something from beyond the gem, like an echo. Naruto paused, what was that feeling? It almost felt like he could see something, but only out of the corner of his eyes. Like a mirage that flickered at the edges of his vision, but it would vanish the moment he tried to lay his eyes on it. Naruto shrugged it off, it probably wasn't anything important anyway. He looked out through Kushina's eyes onto the movie set. He never really paid attention to the movies Kurama watched when he was in control, they mostly bored him. But he did remember the name Fujikaze Yuki, supposedly the world's leading actress and if his memory served him correctly the lead actor in the blockbuster Princess Gale movies. He didn't know why he remembered her, the fact she was hot probably had something to do with it. He yawned again and relaxed onto the branch he was sitting in, he was going to miss this place when he finally got out for good. Maybe he should visit that forest of death thingy every now and then, for old time's sake. Naruto immediately shot that thought down, even if he wasn't in control at the time, getting eaten by a giant snake once was still one time too many in his book. It seemed like they were finally getting started on that filming, some white-haired old guy making some dramatic introduction. Naruto's interest faded and he began to cut off his contact with the outside world. A part of the cliff face explodes, Naruto's attention is immediately drawn to it. This could be a threat to him getting to the capital. Threats could not be allowed. Naruto re-extended his senses, looking through Kushina's eyes. He was already fully recovered. The only question now was if he wanted to get involved in whatever was going on. At the explosion's epicenter stood a man. He was not overly impressive, but he was wearing some strange kind of armor. He would need to watch out for that if he got involved. So you're finally back, Coyuki. The man on the ledge said, looking straight at Yuki, his voice dripping with self-confidence and arrogance. Kushina's and by extension Naruto's view turned to Yuki, or as the man had just called her, Coyuki. Wait a fucking second, Oh fuck, what the hell did he do deserve this? Kakashi looked up at the foreign ninja and swore under his breath. Roga Nadare, I was really hoping I wouldn't have to meet you again. The copy ninja stated evenly, looking for a way out of the situation. The man, Nadare, turned his attention to the silver-haired Jonin. Oh well, if it isn't the legendary Hitaki Kakashi, how have you been? I do hope you're not going to run away with your tail between your legs again. Kakashi gritted his teeth, before taking a quick look at Yuki. Damn it, he knew there was something familiar about her. Nope, not this time, so tell me what's a washed up has been like you doing out here? Kakashi called up to the snow ninja, causing the man's face to wrinkle in anger. I am here for the hexagonal crystal and the princess. Can't have a loose end like her floating about now, can we? Naruto sighed from within the crystal. What was with bad guys and monologuing, seriously? Didn't they know just how much of a plan you could give away doing something like that? Still, this did raise an important question, should he involve himself in the upcoming fight or not? Naruto shrugged the question off, he would just have to play it by ear, things were more fun that way anyway. Defensive formation, Kakashi yelled, charging Nadare. And for Kami's sake, be careful. their chakra armor will make ninjutsu and genjutsu useless. The man Nadare jumped down his kunai leading, Kakashi's kunai and Nadare's own connected and erupted into a shower of sparks. Naruto whistled. Now this was entertainment. He could only see through Kushina's eyes though. Naruto kind of felt like he was missing out on the action. His attention was drawn to Kasumi engaging a fat ninja. Naruto frowned. There was something off about that one. Oh, the man looked okay, he guessed, but there was still something that didn't quite add up. Naruto's eyes widened. The guy's arm, it was a fake, he wasn't expecting that one. Still, he was a human that had become a being composed of almost entirely of Ryoku with a small amount of chakra mixed in. He really didn't have a leg to stand on calling someone else strange. Naruto sighed and settled in. This looked like it was going to be good. He would interfere of course, but only if he was needed. This was way too good entertainment material to pass up for no good reason. Still, his eyes sharpened as he looked at the enemy ninja. The technological advantages they had meant he would have to keep a close eye on them. Else there was the very real chance that he could fall into one of their traps. Naruto wasn't quite sure of the limitations of his new body, but he was in no hurry to test if he could cheat death like a Biju. He had managed to pull that off once when that bastard Kyuubi tried to devour him, and it was a close thing. Naruto was in no hurry to see if he could pull off a repeat performance. The blonde looked on carefully, as he watched the struggle unfold in front of him. It seemed his sister was doing better than he would have given her credit for. The man she was fighting was being kept very much on the defensive. Naruto could see a few places where her taijutsu could use work though. Never let it be said that being trapped inside your own mind with the memories of a demon lord was entirely a bad thing. The damned thing had been alive for thousands of years and seen almost every type of combat imaginable. Though Kyuubi had never bothered to learn them himself, Naruto did have more than enough time to review what the demon lord had seen. Training himself that way, it wasn't perfect, he was more than willing to admit that, but he was probably around low to mid chunin when it came to taijutsu. His sister looked around high genin to low chunin, nothing to snort at considering she was only 14. Naruto hummed appreciatively from within his gem. This wasn't bad at all. He could feel Kushina moving outside, looking for the best place to add herself to the fight. At the moment all the genin were holding their own, so she was not needed, yet anyway. Naruto watched the fat ninja jump away from Kasumi before smiling and holding his left hand out. Before firing what looked like cables past the red head, Kasumi spun kunai coming out and cleanly cutting the cables. Naruto smiled. Now that was a nifty little trick. He would have to file that away for later. He was not risking getting caught in that. The man smiled wider before pointing his fist at the red-headed genin and smiling. The fist shot away from his body like it had just been shot out of a cannon, rushing towards Kasumi, who had no time to dodge. Chains erupted from Kushina's back and tried to wrap around the mechanical fist, only to be dissipated by the fact the owner was wearing chakra armor. Kasumi's eyes widened. No time to dodge, time to evade in any way. Her breathing sped up and the young woman's life flashed before her eyes. She was going to die here, right now, she was going to die. The black blur appeared before her eyes, the blade of shadows came down and the mechanical hand was cut in half. Naruto growled. He was going to hate himself in the morning, he could just tell. Kasumi looked on in a slight amount of wonder. As opposed to what he was wearing when he fought Kyuubi, Naruto's outfit had changed. Black boots and pants, a white shirt with an orange trim and a gray jacket. What stood out most though was the black energy sounding his right arm. It shifted and flowed like water, a red outline surrounding it, a sword, if it could be called that, in his right hand. Though it was short, less than a foot in length and seemingly joined to his arm by the black energy. Naruto sighed, before cracking his neck side to side. He couldn't not take the ninja in front of him seriously. Oni-san? The voice from behind him was frightened. Naruto sighed. He wanted to tell the girl off for calling him that. Naruto really did, but now wasn't the time. Kasumi, get back to the boat, and take the little drama queen with you. Naruto indicated the frozen princess. He did have to wonder what her problem was though. She hadn't moved since the enemy ninja had appeared. I'll get him and tell Kushina to help out Lee and Sakura, I won't need it. He was lying, he probably would need help. But his pride just wouldn't let him accept it from the family that abandoned him, not until he felt they had redeemed themselves. He could feel Kasumi about to say something and gritted his teeth. Kasumi, go! Naruto yelled back. The redhead did not put up any more resistance and grabbed the princess before jumping back to Kushina's location. Oh, you really think you can handle me that easily, huh? Naruto did not give his opponent the dignity of an answer, instead opting to jump forward and slash at him. The fat ninja blocked his strike and smiled. You're weak, boy, and a conceited little weakling too. That is if you honestly think you could kill me without help. Naruto smiled despite the weapon lock and drew back his left leg. The ninja heard the tingling of a bell before his ribs were broken by Naruto's kick and he was sent flying backwards. Naruto grinned, Kami bless bringer light and all other forms of high-speed movement. Conceited, huh? It sounded innocent, but even his opponent over 20 meters away could hear the mockery in his tone. Well, if I'm conceited, then what does that make you? The man drew himself up and growled. The grin on Naruto's face disappeared. Looked like he was about to have to get serious. XXX. Against the pink-haired woman, both Lee and Sakura were not having much luck. The chakra armor the woman had made her insusceptible to Sakura's genjutsu, and the fact her armor gave her flight capabilities offset Lee's taijutsu advantage. All in all, the two of them were having a pretty shitty time. Damn it, how the hell are we going to hit her? Sakura growled out as the pink-haired ninja above dive bombed them again, giving the younger pinkette a nasty gash on her arm. Lee wasn't in a much better state, though most of his injuries came from her ninjutsu. Cracked ribs had taught the woman not come in close to the up-and-coming taijutsu master. The woman up above smiled, running through hand signs. Hayaten. Sabama Fubuki. Ice shifted, twisting and turning, being forged into a new shape for a new purpose. The ice crystals in the air around Fubuki took a new form, looking like dozens of flying swallows, before dive bombing the two unfortunate genins. The pink-haired woman smiled. How lucky these children were to die by a technique named after someone as beautiful as her. Truly, it was too good for trash like them. Lee gritted his teeth as he watched the incoming projectiles. He could still move, he could dodge, he looked behind him. But Sakura couldn't, she was so close to exhaustion it was unfunny. Lee took his Goken stance, one arm out in front of his body. Sakura-chan, I will take down as many of these birds as possible. When that happens, I want you to run as fast as you can back to Kushina-sama. The green-clad genin said in a somber voice. Sakura looked up from behind him in slight awe. It was the most serious she had ever seen Lee. Okay then, but Lee, don't you dare die on me, okay? Sakura pushed herself up and got ready to sprint away. Lee smiled. Do not worry, Sakura-chan, I will not die here, as it would be most unyouthful. The green-clad genin yelled, though he didn't believe it. Without a miracle he was going to die here. Sakura smiled and got ready to run, inside her heart, though she knew that the green-clad genin was about to die, for her. Get down, you idiots. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. The ball of fire roared from Kasumi's mouth, impacting on the swallows of ice and continuing right on towards the flying ninja. Fubuki cursed under her breath and rolled in mid-air to avoid the blow, before twisting to avoid the kunai thrown from below her. Kushina smirked, just a little closer and her kunai would have brought that flying moron down. Huh, how are Yopu here, Kasumi-chan, Kushina dono? Did you defeat that most unyouthful opponent of yours? Kushina had to smile. Lee really was a mini-clone of Guy. She liked Guy, if nothing else he was always honest and upfront with a person even as a child. It was something one could say that Kushina admired, if you dared to say that, about the overly eccentric taijutsu enthusiast. No, not just yet, Lee, don't worry though, we've got that covered. Kasumi assured the two. Sakura cocked her head to the side in confusion. Who's taking care of the fat guy if you two are here? She asked, ignoring the obvious answer. The mere thought that Naruto could be outside the gem scared her like little else could. The power he showed when he killed the Kyuubi and hostility he showed her in the Hokage's office, it wasn't natural, though the pinkhead did ignore the fact she had brought it on herself. Sakura was of the firm belief that Naruto needed to be destroyed before he could harm the leaf, or more importantly her. In Konoha there were currently 3 groups of people. The first group were those that thought Naruto deserved a shot at life. Now he had been separated from the Kyuubi. They were the minority at around 15% of Konoha's overall population. Kasumi and Kushina belonged to this group. The second group was the wait-and-see section, judging him based around his actions, containing around 20% of Konoha's population. Kakashi was in this group. The final group were those that thought Naruto needed to be put down like an animal, before he could harm Konoha or themselves. Said ground mostly consisted of those that had wronged him in the past. That were now scared shitless that he had power would take revenge on them, and also of the plain ignorant or intolerant. The Haruno family as a whole were firmly on this side. Said side was composed of the remaining 65% of Konoha's population. The only reason they hadn't got what they wanted yet was Kushina's firm promise of death to any who attempted to harm her child. Now that he was outside of the Kyuubi's control, this protection naturally included the gem Naruto now resides in. To date there have been 12 attempts to destroy or capture the gem. To date there have been 12 more kills attached to Kushina's bingo book profile. That and Shimura Danzo has suffered the loss of 8 highly trained Root Anbu operatives and an investigation into his so-called private security force by Godem Hokage Senju Tsunade. Sakura's question was answered by an icicle close by exploding. A body sailed through the air and crashed down in front of the 3 genin. Kasumi's eyes went wide. It was Naruto and he was injured, not badly but still he was hurt. The skin on his right cheek had been ripped to shreds, showing some of the muscle underneath as well as bone. His left arm was bleeding and Naruto as he stood was smiling. Naruto groaned, he wanted to kill this bastard, damn it, just surviving was meaningless, just winning was meaningless, kill him, he wanted to kill the fucker in front of him. The black energy of his Fullbring reacted to his anger, pulsing like a beating heart and changing, if only slightly. The black energy spread, latching onto half Naruto's chest and calming. Becoming less a sea of moving, pulsating darkness and more akin to a flowing river. It was calmer and more under control, but all could tell it was also significantly stronger. The sword attached to Naruto's right hand became more defined and lengthened, going from its previous slightly less than a half a foot to a full foot and a half in length. Naruto looked at his opponent, a fat ninja who called himself Mizore. Naruto sighed, wasn't Mizore a girl's name? Well now, that fucking hurt. Naruto muttered, before stretching a little, this was not good. The blonde gritted his teeth before gathering Riryoku under his feet. The sound of a bell and a flash of green light later and his sword was clashing against his opponent's kunai. He smirked and brought his leg up above his own head, before delivering a crushing axe kick to Mizore's head. The fat snow ninja moved quickly, placing his kunai in the path of the kick, at just the right angle to cut Naruto's Achilles tendon. Naruto's smile turned to a grimace as he changed the angle of his attack. His kick changed, the sole of his foot now resting on his opponent's arm, and he pushed off. Turning the kick into a jump, he spun in mid-air, cutting at Mizore's face, drawing a thin line of blood over the ninja's face. His opponent jumped backwards, pulling out several kunai and throwing them at the airborne blonde. Naruto grimaced and pushed more Riryoku to his feet. As he gathered more of the naturally occurring Riryoku under his feet, constructing a small platform beneath his still airborne feet. A quick application of Bringer Light pushed him out of the way of the flying onslaught, another closed him with his enemy. His right arm slashed up, cutting deeply into his opponent's abdomen. Naruto's left fist came back. A quick application of Bringer Light and the sound like a tinkling bell were all the warning Mizore got, before Naruto's fist burned itself in his gut at high speed. Naruto smiled as he saw the large man throw up blood as he was sent into a nearby icicle. The entire exchange had taken less than 10 seconds. Naruto was breathing hard. The blonde side could feel his energy being slowly replenished. It seemed he may well be able to stay outside the crystal indefinitely, but that would take quite some time. Naruto was, at the moment, still be losing far more energy that he had been gaining. Still, the fact he was gaining energy at all proved that one day he may well be able to stay outside. The iceberg shook, a giant whale cracking the moving behemoth. Naruto grimaced, and that was his cue to leave. He jumped to a higher location, coming back to back with Kakashi. Never expected you to be helping us, Naruto. Kakashi said, sounding slightly strained. He honestly thought the blonde would just let them all die if they got into trouble. Never expected to help. Naruto admitted, he was here for one reason and one reason only, and it was not to help Kakushi's genin team. But I need you all alive, at least until I get to the capital, after that you're on your own. He admitted. Kakashi nodded. The silver-haired Jonin had been expecting something like that, and temporary or otherwise, it was nice to have an ally on the battlefield. Can you get them all back to the ship? We need to leave, and now. These bastards have way too much of a home field advantage right now. Naruto nodded and jumped off. Kakashi turned his attention back to his opponent. Naruto managed to catch the flying pink-haired Sank with a slash across the abdomen. Unfortunately, he hadn't managed to kill her. Too bad. Get your asses back to the boat, this place is about to go. Haul ass people. He yelled, charging towards the ship, not sparing the others so much as a glance and just hoping they followed as he ran across the ice to currently moored ship. Naruto jumped the rail and turned around, holding his hand out and hauling Lee on board. Admittedly, he never actually met Lee in person. However, even though Kyuubi had been in control at the time, the young green-clad genin seemed to be genuine about everything. Just the kind of guy Naruto liked, meant he didn't have to keep trying to find hidden meanings in the man's words. Guys like him were worth more than gold to Naruto. His arm found Sakura's hand on it next, and he was sorely tempted to throw her back off. He knew full well that she wanted him dead. However, he needed her help, or to be more precise, he needed her alive, so the pink-haired bitch would live, for now. Threats to himself he could handle. If she ever became a threat to Erza, however, the pink-haired genin would quickly find his blade separating her empty head from her body. It wasn't like anyone would really miss her anyway. Oh sure, her family might. But why should he care about people who wanted to kill him? His helping hand found Kasumi and he dragged her on board. His sister was, if nothing else, a subject of interest to Naruto. She was too young to be directly implicated in his abandonment, so he couldn't hate her, but he still resented her a little, well, maybe more than a little. She had known things he never had, the love of her parents and friends, things he was never allowed to have. It wasn't her fault, so he couldn't fault her, and yet he couldn't help but resent her, even if it was only a little. Still, he was less antagonistic towards her than the rest of his family, and she wasn't hostile, so that got her some more points in her favor. All in all, he was simply willing to give her a chance. Kushina was the final person his hand found. As he pulled her up, their eyes met. Her eyes were full of so many different emotions. Sorrow was prominent, followed by guilt, then self-loathing, and finally self-anger. Naruto was more than unsure about what to feel in regards to his mother, if he dared to call her that. He was angry at her. Hell, he was furious when he survived Kyuubi trying to devour him. He swore an oath to kill her and Namikaze Minato, and now? Now he wasn't so sure. The woman showed honest in her desire to repent for her sins against him and seemingly wanted to be close to him, and yet he couldn't let go of the hate that burned inside his heart. The blonde pushed his personal thoughts aside. He could deal with them later. Getting everyone out alive came first. Then came the most important job of rescuing Erza. He pulled the Namikaze matriarch up onto the ship's deck. Inside, his body was going to break apart soon, and he didn't have enough Riryoku to hold it together any longer. Regretfully, the young blonde let his body fade, turning into partials of Riryoku and being absorbed back into the Shodem's necklace. To rest, he had exerted himself too much and been injured. No matter how lightly, he needed to rest. XXX. When Naruto next awoke, the ship had made harbor, and unsurprisingly enough, the actress's manager, a man named Sandayu, was being interrogated. Well, perhaps interrogated was too strong a word. He was, however, being coerced into giving out information. It was peaceful and the man was doing it voluntarily, but he was also being very subtly manipulated by both Kakashi and Kushina into telling them more than he meant to. Naruto and the others quickly learned that Fujikaze Yuki was a fake name, the actress's real name being Kazuhana Coyuki. Naruto snorted when he heard that. Yes, the princess who knew she was in danger of either being kidnapped or killed by her power-hungry uncle was in hiding as the most well-known actress in the world. What kind of moron hides like that? What the hell was she trying to do? Stick an "I am here, please kill me" sign on her back. A retarded monkey could have done a better job of keeping a low profile. They then found out that Sandayu had served under the previous daimyo, one Kazuhana Susetsu and Koyuki's father. Apparently the last time before he had become her manager that the young princess had seen the old geezer had been when she was very young, that along with her trauma was why she couldn't remember him. The old man went on to tell them how despite being a small country, Yuki no Kuni had been relatively peaceful until around 10 years ago. When Susetsu's younger brother, a man by the name of Dodo, hired some ninja, including the 3 they had fought earlier, and taken over the country by force. The original Kazuhana castle was destroyed, and with it most believed that they had lost the princess as well. Naruto sighed from within his gem. In this world it was like sob stories were a dime a fucking dozen. If it wasn't for Erza he would be saying fuck this and head home. He was not being paid enough for this shit. The blonde thought on that for a moment and made a mental note to make sure Tsunade paid him. No way in hell was he not getting paid for this. Naruto did not work for free, regardless of circumstance. Kakashi admitted to being the one who got the princess out of the country. He was too weak at the time to win against Dodo and his men. The old man went on to say how happy he was when he found out that the princess had survived. Turns out the old man had found her when she was in a live stage production at the time. Right before he broke down crying, Naruto sighed again. He had nothing against tears of happiness, if anything he thought they were wonderful, though he had never had them himself, with one exception that he would take to his grave. But if he could find one person who could actually talk through them rather than just break down, he would be over the fucking moon. It turns out that the princess had woken up by that point, as she chose to interject. It would have been better if I died that day. Came the chillingly cold and impersonal voice from the doorway to the room. Standing inside it was Kazuhana Coyuki, looking beautiful despite the coldness of her last statement. The old man, Sandayu, argued against that, saying how the very fact that Coyuki was alive was in fact the very hope of Yuki no Kuni. Kyoki responded by telling him that she was no hope and that her heart was already dead, as she was unable to shed any more tears. They had all simply dried up. Sandayu admitted to using the film crew after becoming Fujikaze Yuki's manager and deliberately bringing her back to Yuki no Kuni. That brought some of Naruto's anger. It reminded him too much of his own life. The belief that you were in control and had a choice, only to find out that everyone you thought you could trust had backstabbed you and felt nothing for it. His rage simmered beneath the surface for Sandayu. Sure, the man had noble intentions, but so did Namikaze Minato and Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina, and they left him to die. The old man went on his knees before the Ice Queen, in more ways than one, Naruto noted, and asked her to help them overthrow Dodo and become Yuki no Kuni's new daimyo. Before telling her he would protect her with his life. The princess laughed at that, and where were they going to get the men to overthrow Dodo? Coyuki refused, of course, stating that what happened to Yuki no Kuni and its people were none of her business. Naruto could respect that. Oh, it was indeed cruel and cold towards the people, but hey, at least she was carving out her own path. Kyoki went on to say that no matter how you tried, there was no way anyone could defeat Dodo. Naruto felt his respect for the woman wither and die. She wasn't carving out her own path, she was just fucking scared. It was then Sandayu said something that made Naruto's blood boil and his vision turn red with rage. Hime-sama, we do have a way to gain the forces to defeat Dodo in the capital. The old man said slowly. It was a risky path after all. There is, you see, a kind of laboratory there, one that specializes in the manufacture of human weapons. If we infiltrated the factory and took control, we could use the weapons there to fight Dodo. One I have heard is especially deadly. Apparently one of the weapons that resides there has 3 Kekkei Genkei at her disposal. She would make an excellent weapon for the struggle against Dodo. There was a flash near Kushina as Naruto phased into existence. He dashed over the table, before gripping Sandayu by the throat and slamming him into a nearby wall. What do you know about this weapons factory, and how do I get inside? The others were yelling at him, but they were inconsequential, lower than the dirt beneath his boots. The old man looked afraid. Naruto tightened his grip. You can tell me, or... Naruto's Fullbring activated the black blade forming on his arm as he pointed it at Sandayu's throat. I can cut pieces off you, until you decide you have lost enough to tell me. He loosened his grip slightly, just enough for the man to speak. A hand fell onto his shoulder. Naruto whirled around blade leading until it came to rest on Kasumi's throat. The room stopped moving. Palatable rage was rolling off Naruto as he looked at his twin, his face twisted into a visage of hate. Kasumi, I tolerate you. Given time I may even come to like you. But if you interfere right now, I will take your head off your fucking shoulders. Do you understand me, girl? Naruto's twin nodded and moved back. The rest of the room seemed too scared to intervene. Now, old man, what do you know? They could all tell. Naruto was just barely keeping control of his temper. Sandayu could feel the hate and malice rolling off the blonde in waves, and that sword seemingly made of shadows was in no way natural. I don't know too much, but in the capital below the factory district is supposedly a lab that Dodo put into operation. The manager managed to choke out. Naruto snarled at the old man. And how would I go about getting inside? Naruto questioned, his hand still cutting off most of Sandayu's oxygen. The scientists inside have key cards. You would need to obtain one to get inside. Naruto nodded before releasing his grip and turning around, before whirling around again and planting Sandayu firmly inside the wall of the house. That was for speaking like the people inside that lab are just fucking weapons. Naruto snarled at the unconscious old man, before stalking out of the room and then out of the house. Leaving behind a stunned and more than a little scared room, though both Kakashi and Kushina had managed to put two and two together. Whoever Naruto's friend was, they were inside that lab. Naruto continued his angered walk until he reached the ocean, then he simply looked out upon the sea. He felt a warm tear flow down his cheek, that quickly turned to ice. He would save Erza, he would save her no matter what he had to do, even if he had to sacrifice this country to do it. Because she was his everything, Naruto could proudly say that Scarlet Erza was his world, and he had once promised her that nothing, no matter what it was, could change his world. Naruto sighed, he was putting it off and he knew it. He said that he would pull Kushina inside the mindscape when he was ready to talk. He was ready to talk after regaining as much of his strength as possible. That was a week ago. Uzumaki Naruto was running, and he knew it. It wasn't that Naruto didn't want to hear what the redhead had to say. In fact, he wanted to know her reasoning quite badly. However, since coming into possession of his little crystalline prison, the red-headed Namikaze matriarch had made him question a few of the assumptions he had made about her. For one, she seemed to be genuinely trying to repent and make up for everything that happened to him. Hell, the woman killed 12 people just to keep his gem near her. That really had shaken most of the perceptions he had about Kushina and his so-called family. Minato had been one Naruto had been quite unsure about though. Oh, he was a warm and genuinely nice person on the surface, but there was something about him, something dark. He wasn't sure what to make of that, but that feeling of darkness conflicted with the way the man acted, and Naruto could tell that was genuine. So what the hell was going on there? These things made him question what he thought was true about his family. So Naruto decided to simply watch and wait, knowing that he was really just trying to find something, anything, to make his assumptions seem closer to home. When that didn't happen, it scared him. If he was wrong about that, then what else could he have been wrong about? Then the mission to Yuki came up and he finally had a chance to find Erza, who he wanted to possess his gem as long as he resided in it. So he pushed back his conversation with his so-called mother, even more. Naruto sighed. He could think more about this later. Erza came first. He would talk with Kushina once the more important business was done with. XXX. Naruto yawned inside his gem. The director had decided that they would continue filming in Team 7, with the addition of Kushina and himself were along for the ride. At the moment they were forming a convoy of several trucks, vehicles unique to Yuki no Kuni due to their technological superiority. Naruto did have to say though that the forest was quite beautiful and the snow made for some great scenery. Naruto had learned to appreciate things like that. It had been a chore when he finally got his temper under control after talking to Sandayu to apologize to Kasumi. Naruto was many things. Ruthless, easily angered, and to his enemies, cruel. He was not, however, heartless. Naruto knew he was in the wrong for snapping at the girl like that and did apologize for it, but did everyone have to make a big deal out of it? Hell, Kakashi's visible eye was so wide when he said, "I'm sorry," to Kasumi that they looked like they were about to fall out of his skull. That was just insulting. The fact the girl squealed and hugged him afterwards did not help matters. She was lucky he let her get away with that. If any other member of her family tried it, they would quickly find his full-bring sword through their gut. Stupid, guilty conscience. He was not a living hug toy, damn it. Naruto sighed at that thought. His full-bring. He knew the cost of Mugetsu when he used it. Oh, that memory always brought up a warm and fuzzy feeling in him. Getting revenge on that bastard Kyuubi had been good for him, he didn't doubt that. Still, he was only just getting used to the massive downgrade in his abilities. Still, Naruto supposed he was lucky he even had any abilities at all. Considering Mugetsu was supposed to strip you of all of your powers bar none, he suspected the Shodem's necklace had something to do with that. Maybe the self-regenerating chakra of the Shodem had sped up his recovery. That was the only theory he had that made sense anyway. Not like he was complaining though, it was damned handy. On that note, what was up with his full-bring anyway? It seemed to be changing over time, slowly but surely getting stronger. Not like he minded. Naruto could always use the power boost after all. Considering that, maybe the Fullbring was like Shikai and Bankai. However, unlike with his Zanpakuto 2, it would simply keep growing in power until it hit its final form. That kind of made sense. Still, it would have been nice to have someone to teach him, like he had with Zangetsu. It was more than a little bit of a pain trying to figure things out like this. Still, even if he was fumbling around for it, Naruto was still getting stronger. Naruto pushed the thoughts of his Fullbring to the side and focused on his experiences outside the gem. He was starting to gain power when outside, nowhere near enough to keep his body together, but the amount he was able to draw was getting stronger. Add to that the fact it was actually getting harder to go back into the crystal, almost like his body was slowly finding it harder to disperse. Was lending credence to his theory that he may very well one day be able to exist outside of the necklace on a permanent basis. Naruto looked forward to that day. Sure, the inside of the gem was a verifiable paradise, but he knew it was really just a pale imitation of the real world. To awake to the feel of the wind on his skin, to smell the flowers and know they were real, he craved that and couldn't wait for it to become reality. He sighed and spread his awareness out, and allowed himself to view the world through Kushina's eyes, again something he had stopped when he began to think. Looked like the convoy had stopped. More importantly, he had pushed out his awareness at just the right time. Through the cave up ahead there is the town where our comrades are gathered. Sandayu said proudly. Naruto snorted. He had seen the level of technological superiority that Doto and by extension Yuki no Kuni's military possessed. If the people Sandayu were hoping to retake Yuki with didn't possess some kind of edge over Doto, then this rebellion would be doomed fail before it even began. Tomorrow I will make a formal visit to our comrades. The glasses-wearing man gave a small heartfelt smile. They and all of this land are awaiting the princess's arrival more than you know. Naruto laughed inside the gem. They were awaiting a princess that wanted nothing to do with her country, even if it was just cowardice of her part. The conversation broke off as they all climbed back into their trucks and the convoy headed off again. Still, this did give Naruto something to plan for. Perhaps when the rebellion, if they could get their act into gear, managed to sneak into the capital. Funny, he still didn't know its name. He could use the same route to get himself inside. It was something to think on at least. Maybe he could use them as some sort of distraction if it came down to it. That could be handy after all. Not at all put out by the fact he may well use living people as bait, in an endeavor that could quite likely get them killed. Naruto kept piggybacking off Kushina's senses, seeing if he couldn't hear any more useful information. While not exactly useful, some of what the man had to say was informative. It turned out that the cave they were driving through held the tracks of something called a railway line. Apparently it was a giant behemoth of steel and wood that traveled at around twice the speed of their trucks. More importantly, it connected to the capital. Naruto placed the train down as a possible escape method. He didn't really believe he would use it, but hey, anything was possible. The problem came when the convoy stopped. The director decided to start his filming again. Right up until they found out the star of said production had run away, again. Naruto had to give props to the girl, coward or not, she was persistent, he would give her that. The ninja of course were sent after her, including Kushina. Naruto forced his will outside of the crystal, forcing his body to take corporal form. The Fullbringer touched down in front of the startled redhead. Naruto looked at her before shrugging. "I'll help," being his only words before jumping off if a flash of green light and the sound of a tinkling bell. To others it would have been fast, but Kushina could tell he was only moving at high Chunin speeds, though he was close to breaking into low Jonin level. Though the Namikaze matriarch was more than a little saddened by the fact that he did not stay around and talk to her, she put her personal feelings aside and concentrated on the mission. Finding the lead actress of the Princess's Gale movies, Fujikaze Yuki, or if she ever reverted to her real name, Kazuhana Coyuki. XXX. Naruto sighed as he jumped through the snow-covered trees. Stupid girl. He needed the convoy to get as close to the capital as possible, and she was holding him up. The blonde sighed again and pushed more Riryoku to his feet, blurring forward. He was lucky that it wasn't snowing, otherwise he might miss any tracks the woman had left in the snow. Naruto stopped on one of the branches. He could see some depressions on the forest floor. Jumping down, he landed lightly on the powdered ground. He gave the tracks a quick once-over. They were definitely human, rather deep depressions in the snow too. That ruled out a ninja. A smile came to the blonde's face. Looked like he had taken the right path after all. He pushed some more of his Riryoku to his feet and returned to the trees. Before pushing off again following the tracks below, Naruto smiled to himself. Well, at least this little farce of a rescue op wouldn't take much longer. Naruto paused for a second. The woman didn't actually want to go back, so was this a rescue or was it kidnapping? He pushed his thoughts aside. It didn't really matter, the woman would be coming back to the convoy, conscious or not. The blonde saw a body lying on the snow and dropped out of the tree branches and walked towards his target. She looked out of it. Naruto couldn't tell if it was from exhaustion or something else. Still, she was in a bad way. So this is where you got to then? Naruto said in a conversational tone. The woman didn't answer. The blonde shrugged and picked her up in a bridal-style carry, her head resting on his chest, before jumping back into the trees. Everyone's waiting, so let's get you back. The lost princesses didn't answer, though Naruto did note she snuggled into his chest a little. They entered the cave the convoy had previously traveled through and Coyuki spoke the first words Naruto had heard from her since he had picked her up. Why did you come and find me? She said in a small voice. The blonde considered the question for a second. Because I need to get to the capital. I know that the convoy has no intention of actually going inside, but I need to get as close as possible before I leave. Unfortunately for you, they won't move on unless you're there. Hence why I had to come to get your ass back to them. Naruto stated. Honestly, it was nothing personal. Hell, if it wasn't for the fact that he needed to be closer to the capital before he left, Naruto wouldn't have cared if the woman was gone. It was her life after all. Others shouldn't be telling her what to do with it, or how to live it. Coyuki chuckled a little at his explanation. The blonde was always going on about getting to the capital. Each time she had seen him, he had said something about it. The blonde really did have a one-track mind. It may be unfortunate for you, but since I need to get closer, I'll have to bring you back no matter what. The actress sighed. You know that even if I go back, I'm just going to act in front of the camera, nothing else. The black-haired beauty stated. Naruto shrugged. That's your business, not mine. The blonde stated. Coyuki looked up at him in surprise. If you want to help people, help them. If you want to hurt them, then hurt them. No one, not me or anyone else, has the right to tell you how to live your life. Just do the best you can with what you've got. That's the way I've always gone about it. He gave her a quick smile that held more than a little warmth to it. You ain't got to be what anyone wants you to be, Coyuki. You just gotta do what you think you have to. No one has the right to tell you how to live. The blonde stated in a confident manner. Naruto never thought he would be this open with the girl. Still, she personally had never wronged him, so he found no reason to be antagonistic towards her. The blonde smiled as he walked lazily back through the cave. Coyuki seemingly not wanting or perhaps not needing to talk. Naruto really didn't mind either way. He quite liked the silence, and more importantly, it gave him a chance to look at the scenery. It was quite beautiful after all. Then he felt the area around them heat up. What the hell? Naruto muttered, looking around, right as metal rails appeared, the ice coating them literally melting off. Ah, Koyuki-san, you got any idea what the hell is going on? Naruto asked, still confused. The exiled princess looked down at the train tracks and her face went pale. They're rails for a train line, she said in a worried voice. Naruto felt his own face pale. Then he was sprinting. The blonde charged forward, ignoring the shriek of surprise from Koyuki. He didn't need to be a genius to put it together. The tracks had just had the ice melt off them. The train was coming, and Uzumaki Naruto had no intention to become a pseudo-human pancake. The very worried blonde pushed his body harder. The cave started to rumble. That was not a good sound. Naruto was now more than a little worried. He pushed his body harder. The earth below him began to crack with the force he was exerting. Light appeared from behind him, silhouetting his figure. Koyuki screamed. He could see the exit and feel the train getting closer. Green light sparked around his feet and the sound of a bell rang in Koyuki's ears as both Naruto and her blurred forward. You're not going to make it. Just leave me and run. The princesses yelled. She was going to be killed by Doto anyway. There was no need to have someone like the blonde die with her. Shut up and close your mouth. Or do you want to bite your tongue off? Naruto snapped back. Green light flared again as he pushed his body harder. Faster, he had to be faster. His full brain formed. The darkness spread, coating his left arm in addition to his right. Naruto felt the surge in his strength and pushed it all towards his feet. The bell sounded one last time as he threw both himself and his passenger off the rails. As they exited the cave, he pushed them towards a snowy embankment. The train flew past them not a moment later. Naruto's smile was filled with adrenaline as he fell towards the snow. He had just cheated death, again. He was convinced there was no better feeling. The iron and wood monstrosity stopped. That was not good. Oh, it's been a long time, 10 years hasn't it, Coyuki? If possible, the black-haired beauty's face got paler. Kazuhana Doto. She spoke his name in a fearful tone. Naruto gritted his teeth. He still had some life in him. He would not be forced to return to his beautiful prison soon, but he wasn't sure how long his strength would last if he needed to fight more than one enemy. It would be close thing at best. Come now, let me see your face. The voice bleared out from the train. Naruto groaned as he pushed himself off the ground. The Fullbringer put himself in front of the princess, and gave a bloodthirsty smile. Why the hell was he doing this? He wasn't going to gain anything by protecting her right now. If he was smart, he would just let Dodo take her to the capital. Then follow, making it easier to get inside. So why? Why the hell was he protecting her? The blonde's grin turned to a small smile. It really did look like Erza was right about him. He just couldn't stand by and let another suffer. The redhead was right. It would be the death of him one day. The sound of an explosion came from a nearby cliff face. Dozens of full-sized trees rolled down the cliff. Naruto smiled. Looked like Sandayu's so-called rebellion had arrived. Now it was time to see what they could actually do. Because right now it looked like they were not exactly the most well-equipped bunch, and unless they had something more than what they had just shown, they were all going to die. Everyone, our Koyuki-heim is watching us. Victory will be ours. Sandayu roared to his comrades. Naruto sighed. It was time to start looking for an exit. This was going to end badly for the rebellion. Naruto had no desire to find out if he could cheat death a second time. He moved a little closer to Koyuki, getting ready to pick her up and make tracks at the earliest possible opportunity. Dodo, do you have any idea how long we have waited for this day? We, the remainder of the 51st Brigade of Yuki no Kuni, shall avenge the death of Kazuhana Susetsu-sama from 10 years ago. We shall take our pain and our rage out on you, Sandayu proclaimed. Naruto sighed. This was looking worse by the minute. Why the hell were they giving Dodo the chance to mount an effective defense? They should have followed up the moment that the trees impacted the train. Not stand there and fucking monologue. Did they understand how stupid that was? Naruto guessed not, otherwise the morons wouldn't be doing it to start with. The soldiers charged down the cliff screaming battle cries. Naruto saw Dodo smile and felt sick to his stomach. That was not good. The train's compartment opened, revealing hundreds of holes. Naruto didn't know what they were for, but he had a good guess. The blonde just hoped he was wrong. He really hoped he was wrong. The sound like 1,000 keys being placed in a lock could be heard, and a rain of death flew from the train. The damned thing was pumping out thousands of kunai into the approaching soldiers' ranks. Blood splattered over the snow, staining it red, and Naruto could hear Koyuki behind him throwing up. Not that it surprised him. If he hadn't been so used to the sight of bloodshed on a far greater scale thanks to Kyuubi's memories, he probably would have been as well. He could actually hear Dodo doing a power-hungry madman laugh. If it wasn't for the fact that he was disgusted, Naruto would have laughed at the cliché. As it was, he just kept looking for a good way out. Unfortunately, he wasn't finding much. Sandayu was, by some miracle or another, still alive and struggling towards the train. One last wave of kunai flew forward at the old man. Naruto watched impassively as Sandayu's death came towards him. Naruto did not respect the man. Hell, he didn't even like the man. His comments about using the people in that human weapon lab assured that. But he had fought for what he believed in, and so Naruto would watch his death without turning away. The man deserved that much. He might not respect the man himself, but he did respect his goal. Another sound cut through the air. The kuani aimed at Sandayu were stopped by a large Fuma shuriken, smashing them out of the way. Naruto saw Kasumi weaving her way through the battlefield and caught a small smile from the girl as she threw a kuani at the train. It impacted and then exploded. Naruto smiled. Nice thinking. Chains erupted from the earth surrounding Sandayu and pulling him away. Naruto's eyes were drawn to Kushina standing on top of the embankment. An explosion rocked the top of an overlooking cliff face, triggering an avalanche onto the train below. Naruto looked up and saw Lee. He looked at the green-clad genin and smiled. The bushy-browed genin saw him and gave him the thumbs up in the nice guy pose. Naruto chuckled. He swore he could see Lee's teeth shine from where he was. The train started moving again, pulling away as much as it could from the still continuing mini-avalanche, making its way onto the bridge. Naruto's smile turned cruel. If he knew Kakashi, and he did, that was a big mistake. Sure enough, the bridge blew up when the train was halfway across. Naruto sighed. It looked like the worst was over, for now at least. XXX. Noro watched as the film crew burned the rebellion's fighters. It seemed as if Sandayu was the only one who had made it out alive, and even he was on death's door. It looked like he was going to die. No. Naruto corrected himself. The old man was going to die, and soon. He only really had enough time left for some last words. This never would have happened if they hadn't gone up against Dodo. Coyuki said. Naruto didn't comment. The others brought Sandayu's slowly dying body closer. Naruto's face didn't change. It looked like it was time for the old man's last words. Hime-sama. The old man started in a small voice. Naruto sighed. Couldn't he drop the formality even on his deathbed? I am very sorry for getting you involved in all this. He continued. Every person present could feel the strain in his voice. But I and everyone else, it was because you were alive that we didn't lose our hope. Sandayu's voice was slightly stronger now. Naruto didn't bother deluding himself. This was the last spark of a dying man, and it was about to burn out. Ever since you were young, and even now, you have always been our princess. Koyuki's face didn't change. Naruto looked at her from the corner of his eye. Was she putting on a strong facade, or was she really as broken as him, someone that had forgotten how to cry? Even now I still believe you are Yuki no Kuni's princess. I still believe that even now. So please believe in yourself. You're this county's hope. Princess, please don't cry. The light left the old man's eyes as he was dragged into the void. Coyuki looked down at the body impassively. You really are stupid, Sandayu. I cannot cry because you have the eye drops. Coyuki stood up and started walking back towards the trucks. I hope you're all satisfied. We had all better leave now. If we stay, we probably won't be able to get out of this country, she said with her back turned to the others. Naruto chose to speak up. And where exactly do you intend to go? Like it or not, Dodo knows about you now, and he won't stop until he has you. How long can you run for Coyuki? 1 year? 10? In the end you will have to face him. You might as well do it now, because right now you do have allies, next time who knows. He finished softly. The black-haired princess stopped and looked back at him with anger in her eyes. Are you not the one who told me not even 3 hours ago not to let anyone dictate what path I take in life? Coyuki asked in a low tone. Naruto sighed. That I am, Naruto admitted, ignoring the fact that both Kushina and Kasumi had used that he was distracted to walk up behind him. But I also want you to be aware of what you're doing before you leave. If you want to be free of Dodo, this is your best chance. Naruto stated seriously, feeling both Kushina and Kasumi nod in agreement with his words from behind. It was actually a little creepy. Well, I want to leave. Spring will never come to this county. It's just a place where your tears freeze and your heart turns to stone. Koyuki said with conviction. Naruto didn't bother to argue the point. It seemed as if the princess had made up her mind after all. Lee chose that moment to speak. But Koyuki-hime, couldn't you bring some most youthful hope to these people and change that? The green-clad genin asked in a somber tone. It seemed as if even he was affected by the deaths he had just witnessed. At least I believe that was what Sandayu-san thought. Lee affirmed in a confident voice, as he truly believed what he was saying. Koyuki shook her head. Stop talking nonsense, was all she said before walking towards the trucks. Naruto didn't bother going after her. Kasumi ran out from behind her brother. She wondered if he would ever let her call him that, and grabbed the woman's arm. Wait, the redhead yelled, gripping the black-haired princess's arm so tightly it would likely leave bruises. Don't you want to help these people? She asked, tears forming in her eyes. That's enough, Kasumi, Naruto yelled from behind her, causing the redhead to look at him in surprise. No one can tell Koyuki what she can or can't do with her life. She obviously doesn't want to help the people of this country, so just let her go, Naruto said sternly. Kasumi looked at him in disbelief, her eyes wide, as were everyone else's. But Ni-san, the redhead started. Naruto was about to yell at her to stop calling him Ni-san, until his jaw dropped. A massive construct rose from behind the cliff face. It was flying, the fucking thing was flying. A strange bulbous head, its underside was a cabin. Naruto's mouth went dry. Standing inside the doorway was the fat ninja Mizore from earlier. Worse still, he had that fake arm of his already aimed at Coyuki. Naruto had to act fast. He spun, grabbing his crystalline prison and unhooking it from Kushina's neck. A burst of bringer light taking him to Koyuki's side. He let his body deform into particles of Riryoku to blind the group. He placed his prison as he disappeared into Koyuki's breasts, the gem quickly being obscured by pink flesh. "Don't let them find it," Naruto said lowly to the princess as he disappeared. "Those that believe will be saved." His cryptic remark were the last words Koyuki heard from Naruto before he took his place back inside his prison. The fake hand took a firm grip around her waist and hauled her inside the blimp as it took off, leaving the Konoha ninja at a loss. What could they do, besides follow? XXX. Koyuki almost flinched when she felt Dodo's hands upon her face. "You've become quite beautiful, Koyuki," the dictator said, a sick parody of a smile on his face. "Now would you be so kind as to tell me if you have the hexagonal crystal?" Dodo asked, his words tinged with glee. So very soon his dream of the Kazuhana treasure would become reality. "Yes," was all the black-haired princess said. It was sickening that she had to speak with this man. It made her want to vomit. "That's good," Dodo replied, a perverse smile framing his face. "After all, that crystal is the only thing that connects the Kazuhana family as a whole. It would have been a shame to lose it. It's also the key to the treasure, making it so much more important." The man finished, still smiling down at his niece. "Key to the treasure?" Koyuki asked, her voice containing for the first time genuine curiosity. Dodo smiled and nodded, making her sick to her stomach. Thankfully, her work as an actress helped her keep her face void of emotion. "Yes, you see, after I took control of this country from your father, there was nothing left of the Kazuhana family. Susetsu must have surely kept the treasure elsewhere. I looked for it, and I finally found it. It's a massive weapon hidden in the Rainbow Glaciers. More importantly, the keyhole I found there would fit the hexagonal crystal. If I can get hold of the Kazuhana weapon, our country would have the power to overcome the 5 great shinobi nations." Dodo declared. From within his crystal, Naruto snickered. "Disillusions of grandeur much?" Koyuki sat in silence digesting that information. She felt her heart sink lower and it felt as if ice was wrapping around it. Then she felt a warm pulse from within her clothing right inside the gap of her cleavage. The feeling came from Naruto's gem, just a little positive reinforcement from the blonde. It wasn't much, but it did manage to bolster Koyuki's failing spirit. They weren't completely beaten yet. "Now then," Dodo said in a pleasant voice, that made her want to gag. "Would you please hand over the hexagonal crystal?" he said, holding his hand out in anticipation. Koyuki struggled with herself for a second, before removing the gem from around her throat and holding it out wordlessly to Dodo. The dictator smiled as he took hold of the gem, before his smile turned to a grimace as he observed it a little more. His hand was almost instantly around Koyuki's throat, not enough to hurt her. No, she was a valuable hostage, but enough to know he meant business. "Don't fool around with me, girl. This crystal is nothing but a worthless fake," Dodo hissed out into the actress's face. Koyuki was honestly confused by Dodo's outburst, until she looked back over her journey. When she was recovering after her trauma had affected her on the iceberg, that ninja had come into the room. The dots joined up and it suddenly made sense to Koyuki. "Hitaki Kakashi," she mumbled. Dodo looked confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked in a low tone, keeping his hand firmly around the girl's throat. Nader tuned from the helm of the blimp and looked back towards his employer. Ah, they were travailing with Hitaki. It would have been easy for him to swap the gem out with a fake. The snow ninja assured the easily angered leader. The pink-haired woman of the group looked over to Nader. "We should just go and get it then, not like they'll be much of a challenge on our home ground after all," Fubuki said, sounding smug and self-confident. Dodo removed his hand from Koyuki's throat and sighed. "There will be no need for that," he assured his best ninja. "They will come to us anyway and I can wait until then." His grip tightened around the fake crystal, shattering it in his hand. Dodo turned his attention back to Koyuki. "When we land, take her to the lab. Let's see if our little mind jumper can't get some useful information out of her." The 3 ninja nodded. Naruto was doing a happy dance inside the crystal. Oh, this could not be going any better for him right now. XXX. When they touched down, Koyuki was forced into a lab hidden beneath the factory district of Yukihana. Naruto's sweat dropped when he heard the name of the capital. "Snowflower, really?" That just felt so unoriginal. The facility wasn't a big place, just a small section of tunnels and a few labs, nothing overly extensive. Still, Naruto didn't care. Erza was here, that was all that mattered. The ninja escorting her were some grunts of the hidden village of Yukigakure. Dodo saw no reason to waste his elite troops on such a trivial matter. Naruto smiled from within his gem. The princess had been hauled into a cell and told to stay quiet until someone came for her. She didn't have to wait long. Less than an hour later, a scientist walked into her small room. The man was unassuming. Around 40, his brown hair starting to graze slightly at the edges. A bored expression on his face didn't help to make him feel inviting. He was accompanied by 2 Yuki ninjas. Naruto guessed they were insurance, in case Coyuki proved too much for him to handle. "Now then, Kazuhana-san, I am going to need you to come with me," he said in a voice that said he really just wanted this to be over and done with. "We are going to see specimen BK-201, she really is a wonderful little number." The man continued, a small smile on his face. "3 Kekkei Genkei, absolutely amazing, we were thinking of using her as breeding stock. But she is still a little too young, still we should be able to make a few more like her in a few years." The scientist finished shrugging. Naruto was barely holding his temper in check. This bastard was going to die. They arrived at a small white room. Coyuki looked through the window and Naruto felt the air leave his lungs. It was Erza. His heart broke, she looked so different. The Erza he knew was kind of brash and always looked like she was ready for anything. This Erza, her hair was limp and dirty from lack of attention. Her face was shrunken, a result he guessed of being on an IV drop most of the time. He could feel his teeth gritting so hard it was drawing blood. That was it, no more waiting. The doctor opened the door with a swipe of his keycard and Naruto chose then to act. Riryoku roared around Koyuki's body and quickly took his form, Fullbring already activated. The black blade came across once, taking the first Yuki ninja's head from his shoulders. The second only felt cold when his blade cut through his spinal column. The scientist turned around feeling a warm substance on his neck and was met with Naruto's blade going through his gut. His last sight was of Naruto's cold and dispassionate eyes, before his life was snuffed out. Erza looked up when she heard the bodies hit the floor. Her eyes were unfocused and lifeless at first. It made Naruto want to cry. When she saw him, they lit up. With a light so vibrant it outshone the sun, Naruto could feel tears of happiness on his cheeks. Tears, he thought, touching them. An incredulous look on his face. "I didn't even know that I had any of these left." He ran over to the girl and wrapped her in a hug. He smiled through his tears. "Sorry it took so long," he said into her hair. He inhaled, she smelled like strawberries. "So are you ready to get out of here?" he asked playfully. Erza nodded, not quite trusting her voice. Naruto turned back to Coyuki, a true smile gracing his face for the first time and lighting up the room. "Koyuki-chan, could you please give me that crystal I gave you before we got here?" he asked politely. The princess nodded dumbly and fished it out of her breasts. Erza slapped Naruto over the back of the head. "Baka, who told you to get people to hide things in places like that?" she asked, sounding annoyed. Naruto gave a nervous chuckle. "Well, I thought it would be the last place anyone would look." He tried. Erza slapped him over the back of the head again. "Baka, you couldn't have thought of somewhere else?" she demanded, red hair flowing around her as she exerted a little chakra. Naruto went to defend himself again when Coyuki spoke up. How do you two know each other? More importantly, how the hell did you come out of a damned crystal?" The black-haired princess shouted the last few words. Naruto had forgotten she hadn't seen him do that yet. Naruto shrugged. In order, the first were old friends and the second. He gave Coyuki a mischievous smile. "I'm just awesome like that." The princess didn't push the matter. She could tell she wasn't going to get an honest answer. Erza disentangled herself from Naruto with obvious reluctance, fastening the crystal around her throat. "How much can you move, Erza?" Naruto asked, concerned. He really didn't know how well she would be able to handle herself. The redhead grimaced. "They made sure I was in no condition to escape," she admitted, with a snarl. "Even though I could have killed the guards easily enough, I am in no condition to go anywhere far away. Anything more than walking is beyond me, but I can still fight." Erza finished with conviction. "You can still fight?" he repeated like a puppet. "What the hell? No, you can't," Naruto said firmly, a grimace on his face. "Look, I'll take care of everything, so you just stay back, okay?" Naruto said, looking at the redhead with worry. Erza reached up and slapped him again. His head went back and pricked something sharp. He whirled around, sword up in a defensive position. His mouth dropped open. A kunai was floating in mid-air with absolutely no support. He whirled back to Erza. Coyuki had the same incredulous look as him, so it wasn't her. The redhead smiled at him smugly. One of my Kekkei Genkei allows me a limited form of telekinesis. I can only hold up and throw around 6 kunai now. But that should be more than enough to help get us out. Erza finished brightly. Naruto just nodded. He really didn't want to be slapped again. Alright then, Coyuki, you help Erza along and I'll take point. Naruto said, walking out the door as Coyuki gave Erza a shoulder to lean on as they walked. Naruto placed his hand on Koyuki's shoulder and smiled. We've come this far, princess, no giving up now, okay? He said with a bright smile. Any answer she had was cut off prematurely. There they are, came the yell from behind them. Naruto turned and smiled. 6 Yuki ninja were behind them. He gave a quick predatory grin to Erza, who gave him one in return. Naruto felt his full-bringed sword pulsate as he activated it, the sword becoming slightly more defined. He cracked his neck from side to side before charging the snow ninja. The battle for the freedom of Uzumaki Naruto, Kazuhana Koyuki and Scarlet Erza had begun. Naruto ducked under the first strike, his sword swinging upwards in a lazy arc. The snow ninja just looked at him dumbly as the black blade of his full-bring cut through his arm like a hot knife through butter. Poor bastard didn't even get time to scream as a telekinetic kunai found a new home, right inside his throat. His left arm came up, deflecting a kunai away from his vulnerable neck. The black substance his full-bring was made of seemed to act like armor. Naruto felt a little glad about that. It would make him far harder to damage in the long run. He spun, blade going out wide and cutting the tendon in another snow ninja's leg. His leg came up, smashing the man in the face with his shin and sending him careering backwards into 3 of his comrades. 6 kunai flashed past him, stabbing and slicing at the one still standing ninja as the other 4 scrambled around on the floor trying to get up. The full-bring-clad teenager ran forward, ducking under the wild swing of the still standing ninja and sliding on his knees. He propped himself up on one hand, and in a move stolen from Rock Lee, kicked the struggling ninja in the chin. Erza didn't waste time, quickly redirecting the levitating kunai to attack the ninja in midair. The man quickly found his spine severed and his life blood falling towards the floor. Naruto spun on his hand and flipped himself to his feet, facing the 4 remaining ninja. The blonde sprinted forward. The sound of a bell was heard by the snow ninjas right before one of the 4 had his neck snapped by a bringer light-enhanced kick. Naruto used the force of his momentum to spin his sword kept close to his body, blade held horizontal to the ground. The spin was completed and another ninja went down, clutching his throat in a vain attempt to stem the blood flow. The remaining 2 attacked him, one going high with a kunai, the other low with a kick. Naruto smirked. Morons had already forgotten, it seemed. He jumped, placing his sword between him and the incoming kunai, and smiled down viscously at the snow ninja on the ground. The man looked up in confusion until a pair of kunai stabbed his eyes out. The man didn't even get time to scream before another kunai stabbed him in the lung. Naruto smirked. That telekinesis ability really was deadly. Naruto spun in mid-air, his sword blocking the incoming kunai. The blonde let his leg fall onto the snow ninja's outstretched arm, hyper-extending the ninja's limb. The black blade came down, cutting into the ninja's neck. The blonde smiled as his enemy's blood splashed over his face. It was hard not to, after all these bastards were scum for supporting a place like this existing. The blonde smiled back at his 2 companions. Erza just smiled, but Koyuki looked like she was going to vomit. Naruto kind of had to shrug at that. Hell, the woman had seen death on a far greater scale when Sandayu died. Naruto had to wonder what her was problem now. Still, most people couldn't look at death like he could, or most ninja could for that matter. Naruto had just seen so much of it, both from Kyuubi's memories and his own experiences, that it simply didn't affect him anymore. So what's the plan? Erza asked, her breathing slightly heavy. Simple, we erase any and all data from the computer system, failing that we delete as much as we can. Then open up the cells and let the inmates out. I snagged a key card from that scientist earlier, so we don't need to worry about that. After which we haul ass out of here and meet up with the others, and if we are very lucky, avoid fighting Dodo before we leave. Naruto replied in a conversational tone. Why are we destroying the data and not just running? Coyuki asked, sounding as if she wanted nothing more than to leave. Naruto sighed. Was now really the time for long explanations? The first reason is because when others fight Dodo, and trust me they will no doubt try to find this place. I don't feel like leaving some data lying about so that Konoha, be it the ninjas, civilian councils or even the advisors' initiative, could use to track down bloodline holders. Whether or not they want to use them as human weapons or as breeding factories is inconsequential to me. The very idea that others should have more say in your life than you should sickens me. I won't let that happen to these people if I can avoid that. Good enough answer for you? He asked Coyuki. The actress quickly nodded her head, not really knowing how to react to the normally cold man's surprisingly emotional confession. Naruto sighed, then rolled his shoulders. At any rate, we should probably get moving. Erza and Coyuki nodded in agreement before setting off at a brisk pace. Somewhere between a jog and a run, still it was better than Naruto was expecting given Erza's condition. In truth, the blonde would have liked to travel at a slower pace so as to not risk Erza's condition getting worse. Sadly, considering where they were, he didn't have that luxury. Well, that and Erza would probably kill him for implying that she couldn't take care of Dodo's minions and that she was being treated like a delicate little flower. Well, that or she would hug him and tell him how thoughtful he was. Naruto really wasn't sure which one it would be. Erza really did confuse him at times. The white hallways were passed quickly, Naruto looking down each one and occasionally booting a door open. Okay, maybe the place was both bigger and more confusing than he had first given it credit for. They were also encountering less resistance than Naruto had assumed they would. Other than the first 6 he had killed, they hadn't really faced much resistance, and the blonde couldn't help but feel worried by that. What was causing it and why? Naruto gritted his teeth and continued his frantic search for the data room. Right before an explosion rocked the lab from nearby. What the hell was that? Naruto yelled back to his 2 companions. 10 minutes earlier, Kasumi sprinted through the underground lab, Kushina following close behind. The redheads were both panting slightly with their exertions. Kakashi and the others were still topside, providing a distraction. Still, this lab was made to be confusing as all hell, but they could already tell her brother was here, and where he was so would be the princess. The reason they knew he was here were the 6 corpses they had found earlier. Most were killed by a sword. Hidden lab that her brother wanted to find. Her brother is taken along with Coyuki, and now in the base they find 6 bodies, most of which had sword wounds on them. That was in no way a coincidence. A snow ninja walked out from around a corner. Kasumi didn't think, she just acted. Her right hand came up, a chain exploding from her palm. The ninja registered the sound of the chain. But by then it was already far too late. Her chakra chain wrapped around his throat and crushed, breaking his spine and severing his carotid arteries. The redheads ran past him. He would be dead shortly anyway. Where the hell are they? Kasumi roared inside her head, dashing past another hallway before falling flat on the floor as a Kuani sped through the space her head was occupying a split second before. A hissing sound made her freeze, and she looked up, horror plain on her features. An explosive tag attached to the end of the kunai was about to blow. She screamed, and then her vision turned white as the tag exploded. But the pain never came. Kasumi looked up to find her mother's chains around her. A barrier must have protected her. Kasumi looked back. Her mother was dispatching the snow ninja with a well-placed thrust of her ninjutsu. They heard the sounds of combat coming from down a hall and raced towards it. Kasumi and Kushina threw themselves to the floor to avoid the katana that almost took their heads from their shoulders. Standing amongst a pile of 4 bodies was Naruto, who was panting slightly. It looked like that black substance had extended, as it was now covering both his arms, his chest, and left leg. The blonde looked at the pair he had nearly beheaded and shrugged in a slightly apologetic way. So what are you 2 doing here? Naruto asked in a neutral tone. Kasumi and Kushina flinched hearing those words directed at them by family. Though they both did acknowledge that they had lost any right to call him that a long time ago, the admission, though private, still felt like a knife had been pushed through Kushina's chest. We're here to help, Kasumi said brightly. Naruto sighed. It was time for Plan B. He couldn't delete the data now, it would be too suspicious. Looked like Plan B it was. Open the cells from the main control panel, set up the self-destruct sequence, set it to go off in 30 and haul ass. He just hoped they would agree, otherwise he would have to come up with a new plan on the spot. Not that he couldn't do that, but plans like that tended to be really half-assed. Fine, we have to find the main control panel. Once we're there I'll use the keycard I have to let the other inmates out. After that we can set up the self-destruct and leave. Naruto said. The black substance on his body moved a little more, coving half his right leg. Kushina decided to use the chance to speak up. Society Naruto. She barely caught herself from calling him Sochi, and if his grip on the ethereal black blade was any indication, Naruto knew it. His face looked impassive, but his grip on the blade was so firm his arm was shaking and his eyes had burned with rage for a brief second. At least that had subsided when she caught herself. Now Naruto was back to the same cold, impassive look he had on around her as always. It hurt to see that look directed at her by her own child, but if nothing else Kushina was a realist. The redhead had known from the moment she found that Naruto was in some form alive, that she may well have lost the right to call him son forever. It hurt more than she was able to express when she had come to that realization. She pushed her inward regrets aside. Now was not the time for her doubts and self-pity. Why would you need to activate the self-destruct? Surely it would be better to let the lab stay standing so that at least people could benefit from the work it did. Even if that work was inhumane, at least then maybe those people's deaths could mean something. Kushina ventured. Naruto bit his tongue, careful not to make the action visible. How could he handle this? The last thing he needed was for Konoha to get their hands on that data. Naruto honestly didn't think that Kushina and the others would take the data. It was Danzo he was worried about. The others didn't care for the most part about biological weapons and bloodlines, but for the Warhawk it would be too good to pass up. The moment Danzo heard about a lab like this would be the moment that he sent Root out to gain all, or at least as much as possible, of the data stored inside. Still, he didn't have an argument he could put against that logic without saying more than he was comfortable with about Erza. They would find out about her first two bloodlines fast enough. That didn't faze the blonde. No, what worried him beyond anything was Danzo, or hell even Konoha in general, finding out about Erza's third bloodline. If he knew of it, the old War Hawk would stop at nothing to get it. It was in effect the ultimate reconnaissance and information gathering ability. For a man like Danzo that kind of thing would be a godsend. Hell, for anyone Erza's bloodlines would be a godsend. The redhead was a ready-made assassin and information specialist. Naruto just didn't want her to be in more danger than she was already going to be. Okay, so his plan just needed to be adjusted. He couldn't stop all the data from getting out, then Naruto would simply have to do the next best thing. He would just delete as much of it as possible. Erza was called subject BK201. He would simply erase all the files A through E, at least that way it wouldn't look quite as suspicious. Still, there was the problem of how Naruto knew where Erza was despite the distance and the fact he was in effect trapped inside a gem. But the blonde was fairly confident he could bullshit his way around that. I just don't like the fact this place exists. Naruto admitted to the Namikaze matriarch before sighing. It just reminds me a little too much of what I went through. Not given a choice about their lives and treated like animals, it sickens me. The slight edge of rage that was in Naruto's voice left the two Namikazes with no illusions about how utterly furious he was, considering his usual fairly emotionless demeanor. Erza walked up and placed her hand on his shoulder. Naruto allowed the tension to go out of his body at the contact. He knew Erza would know his reasons for wanting to destroy the data, still considering she wasn't speaking up against leaving the lab intact. Naruto assumed that she wanted whatever data was stored here to be as much use as possible to others. Typical Erza. That damned kind heart of hers would lead to her death one day. Still, Naruto would do his best to destroy the data pertaining to her. He wouldn't risk her like that. Well, let's get going. We are still going to need to get to the main computer console anyway. I overheard the guards talking once. Apparently when someone breaks in, a lockdown is initiated and it can only be shut down from there. Erza said, smiling at her blonde companion, a smile that Naruto returned. That surprised Kushina. The closest she had ever seen Naruto to an honest smile was the bloodthirsty grin he sometimes sported in battle. Kushina paid attention to her child's companions for the first time. The first she knew fairly well, the exiled princess of Yuki no Kuni Kazahana Coyuki. The other, however, she had never seen before. She had red hair, dirty, and it was also fairly long, reaching halfway down her back. The girl was fairly tall, standing at only an inch below Naruto's own height, though her frame did look fairly shrunken. That being said, with the fact she was wearing a hospital gown that could probably be attributed to being on an IV drip for an extended amount of time. Her eyes were a warm and inviting brown, and even with the unhealthy pale white of the girl's skin, she had an undeniable sense of life and vibrancy about her. "Who might this be?" Kushina asked, raising her hand towards Erza. The redhead smiled at the eldest of the three Uzumaki. "Name's Scarlet Erza, I'm an old friend of Naruto's." The redhead finished smiling brightly at the two leaf ninjas. Kushina nodded. That made a kind of sense after all. This girl, Erza, was probably that friend that Naruto wanted to go to Yuki to help. The one that meant enough to him for Naruto to threaten to crush her mind and then force her body to get him to the country if Tsunade didn't have Kushina attached to the mission. Kushina gave a bright smile of her own to the younger redhead. Being antagonistic towards Naruto's friends would not get her in his good books, and Kushina really was trying to make up with her eldest. "Well, I'm Uzumaki Kushina, and this is my daughter Kasumi." The red-headed Namikaze matriarch finished with a fist pump. As Kasumi looked inquisitively at Erza, as if evaluating her, Erza chuckled at the enthusiasm in Kushina's voice and her actions at displaying it. "It's nice to meet you. I would like to talk more, but now really isn't the time." Erza finished with a smile, drawing a pair of grim nods from the two Namikazes. Naruto turned back to Coyuki, who had been quite quiet since the conversation had begun. "You ready to go, Coyuki-chan?" Naruto asked, some honest warmth in his voice. The princess smiled at the blonde's attempt to make her feel included. "Yes, I am. Thank you for asking, Naruto." The blonde just nodded in acceptance as Erza slowly walked back to the black-haired beauty and placed her arm around Koyuki's shoulders. The five nodded to each other before taking off at a brisk jog. The sound of a bell ringing was the last sound the snow ninja heard before Naruto's black-clad left leg impacted with his neck, killing him instantly. The blonde dropped silently to the floor, catching the body and laying it down. Naruto pressed himself to the wall and reached out for the door handle on his right, careful not to let his shadow drop onto the glass. The blonde wrenched the door open and charged inside, black ethereal blade at the ready. Fortunately, no one was inside, though his face did light up in a small smile as he saw the computers. The blonde walked over and swiped the keycard through its slot and watched impassively as the computer came to life. The screen lit up. Naruto's hand went to the mouse and quickly clicked on the folder labeled Inmate Data and opened it. The blonde sighed. Thank God they had marked everything by letter and number. He quickly clicked on the B folder and scrolled until he found the file labeled BK201. He let out a breath as he opened it. A picture of Erza appeared. Good, it was the right file. He quickly sent it to the recycle bin before entering the program and deleting it for good and returning to the inmate listing. The blonde smiled as he highlighted every folder and hit delete before closing the file and walking back to the doorway and making it look like he had just got the computer working. The blonde stuck his head out of the doorway and gestured to his companions hidden around the corner. Kasumi came around first, sprinting to the room and rushing inside, followed by Erza and Koyuki, with Kushina bringing up the rear. Naruto walked back to the console and took hold of the mouse again. "I just got this working, but I think the folder we're looking for is here," Naruto said, clicking security protocols, taking special note of the one called Data Erasure, that would be put into use before he left. Naruto scrolled down the list. It was just so convenient that they would label everything so clearly. That being said, most places did. Probably so that even an idiot would be able to understand what to do. That was working against them right now. The blonde smirked as he clicked on the lockdown folder and quickly clicked on the stop lockdown option. "Time to leave," Kushina noted. The others nodded. "You guys go. I'll make sure they can't just reset the lockdown when we leave," Naruto said, turning back to the computer screen. Kushina bit her lip in indecision before nodding to her eldest and taking the lead with the other three following. Naruto smiled as he saw them leave and opened up the recycle bin and deleted its contents before reopening the security protocols and clicking on Data Erasure. He smiled at the options displayed. "Do you really want to erase all prisoner data? Click yes or no." Naruto's hand hovered above yes before stopping and closing the file and returning to the security protocol menu. He had almost forgotten about this. Naruto quickly redirected himself to prisoner options. The first option made him smile. Release all door locks? Yes or no? That made Naruto almost chuckle. Before clicking the Yes option and returning to the data menu and quickly clicking the Yes option to erase all the facility's data on its inmates. Keeping the results of the experiments, at least that way no one would be able to identify what prisoner was involved with what experiments unless the prisoner themselves told them. But the results of those experiments, monstrous as they were, could still help others, just like Erza wanted. The blonde summoned his sword and pulled back before cutting the screen in half and destroying the keyboard and mouse. Good luck on stopping the data deletion now. Naruto gave a self-satisfied smile before running out the door and following the discrete markers that Kushina had left him to aid in finding them. XXX. He caught up to the group just as an explosion rocked the lab. What the hell was that? Naruto demanded, as he caught up. Kushina grimaced. That would be Kakashi, he probably blew up part of the castle. Naruto blinked confusedly before shaking his head. Castle? Kasumi nodded and decided to field his question. Yep, castle. You see, the vast majority of Yukihana is actually situated inside a giant castle. From what we could tell, the idea behind it was to add protection to the more important districts, such as the factory district, other than that the less important districts are on the surrounding plateau. That explosion we just felt was most likely Kakashi blowing up part of the castle as a distraction. The young redhead finished sounding proud of herself. Naruto nodded. Okay, then any idea where the exit is? He asked. It was time to leave. Naruto knew that as a definite. Coyuki nodded. Yes, judging from what we saw in that computer room, the exit should be just up around the next corner. The black-haired princess stated. Naruto nodded again before walking to the head of the group. No one minds if I take point then? The blonde asked. Hearing no argument, Naruto took off at a jog, keeping ahead of the others. Not far enough for him to be unable to help them if they needed it, but far enough away to trigger any traps without endangering the others should he run into them. Naruto rounded the corner and almost sighed in relief. No one was guarding the exit. He guessed with the lockdown cancelled they didn't see the need anymore. The blonde Uzumaki waved his hand telling the others to hurry. The four moved past him and jumped into the elevator. Naruto hit the up button. It was time to leave. The elevator rose quickly and Naruto found himself walking out into a seemingly abandoned warehouse. Another explosion rocked the area and the blonde faced Kushina. Kushina, where were you planning to meet up with Kakashi's team? Naruto asked. In the residential district of Yukihana, then head out via the south gate. We rigged various other places with explosives before Kasumi and I went in to get you and Coyuki out. Oh, and speaking of that, here you go, Coyuki. Kushina said, turning to the snow princess and handing her a purple gem, the real hexagonal crystal. Thank you, Kushina-san, the black-haired princess said, cradling the gem to her heart like it was her child. Another explosion rocked the group. Naruto had a grimace on his face. Kushina, you go and help out Kakashi with all the explosions. He and the others might be having a hard time. Kasumi and I will get Coyuki and Erza to the extraction point. The redhead looked like she would argue for a second before nodding and smiling at Naruto. Alright, be careful, okay? Before she leaned over and gave Kasumi a quick peck on the cheek, Naruto turned his attention to Erza right before he felt a hand on his shoulder. The blonde turned around annoyed only to have Kushina place a quick kiss on his cheek as well. You two better be careful now, Kushina stated before jumping away. Naruto was too stunned to even stop her trying to figure out what the strange and yet comforting sensation was. Before shaking it off, it didn't really matter after all. Right then, let's go. Naruto led them on their jog. Run outside following the hallways, Kasumi next to him directing where they should be running. They came to an intersection of what looked like the interior of the castle. Any idea where to from here? Naruto asked the redhead ninja. Kasumi shook her head for a negative response. They were taking a different route back, an explosion having blocked off their original one. I think I know where we are. Coyuki spoke up. Naruto and the others turned their attention to her and the black-haired princess seemed to shrink into herself a little, until Naruto motioned for her to continue. If we take the left-hand fork we should arrive at the exit to the residential district shortly. She ventured. Naruto nodded before looking over at Kasumi. I'll take point if you don't mind. The blonde half stated, half asked. The redhead nodded in acceptance and drifted to the back of the group. He turned down the left fork and jogged down its senses alert and ready. The group kept running following Koyuki's advice on where to go. It was better than guessing after all. though Naruto was starting to grow concerned about the lack of resistance. Either the other group was making a better job of being a distraction than Naruto thought, or they were walking into a trap. The choice was not doing his nerves any good. They took another corner by Coyuki's urging and emerged into a boxed-in room. Naruto's sense of danger went into overdrive. Something was horribly wrong. The room was dark. The other three came up behind him. Naruto was about to tell them to backtrack when the lights came on. Dodo was sitting on a throne above them. Naruto gritted his teeth. This was bad. Though he did have to wonder, was Dodo actually sitting there in darkness just so he could make a dramatic entry? The large dictator smiled down at his assembled guests. "Well done, Coyuki," the man said with a smile, putting the others on guard. "You have brought the hexagonal crystal right to me. If you want to live, then come to my side." Naruto turned to face the black-haired woman. What the hell was she really considering this? The black-haired princess dropped Erza and ran forward. Naruto dashed forward and caught the falling red head. Kasumi made a grab for the princess but missed, and before she could try again, Dodo's three elites appeared before the young Namikaze, stopping her advance to retrieve Coyuki. Naruto gritted his teeth. Were Coyuki's opinion of Kasumi, Erza and his own skills really so low that she would take Dodo's side just to live? She would really take the side of the man that killed her father just for a chance at life? One Dodo was most likely lying about. Was she really throwing away her integrity for that? Really? That was pathetic. No, that was beyond pathetic. She really wanted to live that badly that she could throw away everything she supposedly believed in. The black-haired princess handed the hexagonal crystal over to the tyrant. "There, it's done," she said lowly, almost smiling at her betrayal of Naruto and the others. The blonde was seeing red. All his anger and hatred were quickly finding a target in the black-haired princess. He had been betrayed, again, but what made it worse was that it was by someone who already knew the taste of betrayal and now freely gave it to others. That bitch didn't deserve to live. Despite his body screaming at him to kill the bitch, Naruto held himself in check. If he left, Erza would be an easy target for the three Jonin-level ninja before Dodo's throne. Erza meant more than petty revenge. The blonde forced his anger down. It was beyond a bitter pill to swallow. Coyuki looked down on the three with dispassionate eyes. "You should remember, I am an actress. I just acted a whole scene until you got me to Dodo. I was quite sure that if I handed over the crystal and renounced all claim to the throne, then I would be allowed to live, unlike all of you. It seems I am right, correct, uncle?" Coyuki asked, looking down at the three before her like they were worth less than dirt, while Dodo chuckled. "Of course, Coyuki, as long as you do that, I have no problem with letting you live. I do quite enjoy your movies after all." The dictator said, a smile plastered over his face. Naruto wanted to gag at that look. A smile should not be on that man's face, a death grimace however. Well, now that was a completely different matter. Naruto thought that would look quite fetching on Dodo's face. The blonde smiled sadistically, especially when Naruto mounted his head on pike and desecrated the bastard's body, then it would look divine. That was all an act. Kasumi shouted out to the actress in anger. "We were concerned about you, we wanted to help you. Damn it, Coyuki, we wanted to help you. Why couldn't you trust us to do that?" Kasumi roared the last words at the princess, whose impassive, emotionless gaze didn't change in the slightest. "Yes, the whole time with all of you was just an act." The princess spun around to face the dictator and pulled a tanto out of her sleeve, stabbing the small blade deep into Dodo's stomach. "It's reasons like playing fools like you that I can call myself an actress, Dodo," Coyuki yelled while putting more pressure on the blade. Dodo made a strangled sound as she pushed the blade deeper. "You little bitch," Dodo roared, his right hand coming up to grip Coyuki's throat and squeezing. Naruto was already looking for an opening to help. It looked like he wasn't betrayed after all. But he did agree with Coyuki, that had been one hell of an act. She really had earned her reputation of world's best actress. "It looks like I was right after all, Naruto," the black-haired beauty managed to gasp out as she was strangled. "If I returned to this country, I would die." Coyuki managed to push her body closer to Dodo, looking to push the blade deeper and ensure a killing wound. "That's why I have to at least try to kill him." Koyuki's vision started to go dark as her brain got less and less oxygen. "Naruto, thank you. You were right, no one but me could choose my life. I won't run away anymore." Some blood tricked out of Koyuki's mouth as she said this, and her life felt like it had almost been completely cut off. No, don't go and get yourself killed, Coyuki. Kasumi yelled to the princess, who was looking more and more like a corpse. Naruto was gritting his teeth so hard that his gums were bleeding. The hell, he couldn't even see a way past Nader and his goons. He wasn't able to do anything. Damn it, he felt so fucking helpless. The two fell off Dodo's podium and towards the floor. It was only around a 7-meter drop, but to Naruto it looked like it lasted an eternity. Coyuki! Kasumi yelled out to the princess and ran towards her. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he saw Nader's and his thugs let her pass. His eyes widened in understanding. Kasumi, get back! Naruto yelled out to the redhead, who heeded his advice just in time to avoid a nasty hit from Dodo. The dictator stood up, a small smile on his face. As if I of all people would die by a little toy katana like this. Dodo chuckled dismissively at the notion as he took off his robe. Naruto's eyes hardened as he saw a black version of Nader, Mizore and Fubuki's chakra armor. It looked like Dodo was wearing an upgraded version. He swallowed his mouth dry. This was starting to look bad for them. The tyrant faced the three, a smile now firmly plastered on his features. As you may have guessed, this is the newest version of the chakra armor my subordinates are wearing. The man said smugly. Kasumi wisely retreated to Erza and Naruto's side. All three were ready for action, but Naruto doubted that Erza would last long. She simply wouldn't be able to keep up with a high-speed battle that would happen if they fought Dodo's men. Damn it, this was looking bad. Coyuki coughed in the background and Naruto let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Dodo looked amused and picked her up under one arm. Keep your filthy fucking hands off her. The blonde growled at the black-armored daimyo. Naruto gave a quick look at Kasumi and got a small nod in return. The sound of a bell. Naruto was in front of Dodo. His black enthrall katana came down, cutting Dodo's face from left temple to right jaw. The tyrant's arm came across in an attempt to hit him. Naruto placed his feet on the arm and used the force to propel himself backwards, landing next to Erza and Kasumi. The latter of which stood next to the former protectively, for which Naruto was silently grateful. Dodo looked livid at the fact he had been injured, then looked down at the hexagonal crystal in his left hand and smiled. Now then, Coyuki, he said to the black-haired princess who was struggling in his grip. Shall we go? To the place far beyond the rainbow. The ceiling exploded and a cable attached itself to Dodo. Naruto saw 4 figures drop through the ceiling. He could identify them as the remaining member of the team. Look after her. Naruto growled to Kasumi, who gave him a shaky nod in return. Naruto grabbed a kunai with a rope he had attached to it, that he had pilfered off an enemy ninja. The blonde pulled back and threw it at Coyuki, wrapping it around her forearm and being dragged up with Dodo. Naruto took one last look down. Kushina and Kasumi grabbed Erza and jumped off, as did Kakashi, Sakura and Lee following the snow ninja. The battle wasn't done yet. He closed his eyes as they went through the smoke. When he opened them again, they were flying through the sky. Naruto looked up. It seemed Dodo's armor had wings attached. Well, wasn't that a nifty little trick? The tyrant noticed him and Naruto grimaced as he saw Dodo rush towards him and cut the rope. Damn it, he wasn't strong enough to use Bringer Light in mid-air to stay afloat yet. The trees raced up to meet him and Naruto forced his Riryoku to his feet. Sure, he couldn't stand on mid-air yet, but that didn't mean he couldn't slow his fall. The sound of a bell rang throughout the forest, followed by the sound of branches breaking. As he fell, the blonde could swear that he heard Coyuki call his name. Idiot, she should be worried about herself at a time like this. The heavily bleeding blonde pulled himself out of the pile of branches he had inadvertently made on impact with the trees and jogged forward. His body was in agony. This was the longest he had ever been outside of the crystal, and he was almost spent. He could feel the world trying to exert its influence on him to force him back inside his prison, and Naruto was sorely tempted to follow that urging. The blonde gritted his teeth. Using a will that should no longer exist in his Riryoku-depleted body, he pushed back the rules of the world. The man that defied death pushed back the world that hates contradictions with nothing but sheer willpower. A snarl formed on his face. He would not let it end here. Naruto refused to let it end here. He pushed harder. He had more than this. This world that hates contradictions rules were forced to bend. Naruto could feel his body become more solid. He could feel himself drawing more and more power from the world. The earth, the sky, the air, the trees, it didn't matter, he drew power from it all. Natural chakra and Riryoku swirled around him as he pushed his indomitable will against the will of the world and won. The blonde forced everything to bend to his will. His full bring roared around him, a maelstrom of black power that covered his entire body. As quickly as it started it ended. Naruto was left standing in the center of the snowy clearing, fully rejuvenated, the feel of natural chakra and Riryoku rushing throughout his body. His full bring changed to suit the new him, a black coat, gray pants and shirt, a red spiral over his heart, combat boots on his feet. Bone-white armor covered his left arm up to his elbow joint, more covered his legs up to his knees, and a spiral of white bone started at his shoulder and wrapped around his right arm, stopping on the back of his right hand. Naruto looked down at his katana. It was no longer fused to his hand. It was around the size of a dado but far thicker. The blade was 6 inches in thickness. He noticed a sheath made of bone on his left hip. He gave a brief laugh. He couldn't exist outside permanently yet, but he had just taken a giant step forward. The rate at which he was gathering energy from around him could almost sustain him. But if his previous absorption rate was an indicator, then he would still need another year before he could exist outside his prison. Naruto could wait that long. The blonde looked towards the direction Dodo had flown before taking off at a run, right before he stopped at the sound of a horn. The director and 2 of his aides with a camera already rolling pulled up next to him. "Need a lift?" the old man asked. Naruto just laughed and jumped on. "Just a little longer, Coyuki. Just wait a little longer, I'll be there soon." Damn his hero complex. XXX. Dodo landed his prisoner in tow. It was a rather majestic place, a large open expanse of snow and ice with 7 large icicles that seemed to pierce the sky. The pre-dawn sky was slowly lightening, giving a small amount of light to the 7 still monoliths. An array of color spilled out of them, having the 7 live up to their name as the Rainbow Glaciers. "So I've ended up here after all." Coyuki lamented. She had hoped she would have killed Dodo with her attack. Even if she had died in the attempt, at least she would have died as she lived, on her own terms. Dodo walked to a small shrine at the center of the snowy expanse. The tyrant gave a brief laugh and placed the crystal he had found so hard to obtain into its slot. Nothing happened for a second before the shrine lit up like the sun. The light ran across the ground, showing the previously hidden technology under the blanket of ice and snow. If one were to look on it from above, the light would resemble a giant snowflake. Each of the 7 glaciers lit up with an almost supernatural inner light that gave them the same hue as a rainbow, further reinforcing what the 7 monoliths surrounding Coyuki were named for. Dodo laughed a little. Finally, after 10 long years, it was all coming together. The tyrant looked around. "What's happening? Where's the treasure?" Dodo was getting slightly anxious. After all, the crystal had been inserted several minutes ago and still nothing had happened. Steam shot up from near one of the 7 glaciers, as the ice started to melt and the sound of a stream came to Coyuki's ears. "It's getting warmer?" She spoke lowly, trying to figure out what exactly was going on. Dodo had told her this was some kind of weapon. What exactly was going on? It had suddenly clicked for Dodo. A heat generator? This is what you call the Kazahana treasure? He spat out as if every word he had spoken was a bitter poison. Coyuki felt a hand on her arm and looked up. A smiling blonde looked down at her. "Sorry, seems like I'm a little late, princess," Naruto said in a joking tone before picking Coyuki up in a bridal carry and jumping backwards. Dodo turned a snarl on his face. Naruto placed the princess down and walked away, drawing his katana from its sheath. Naruto didn't bother with a smart-ass remark. Now really wasn't the time. The blonde charged forward. Dodo sped through hand seals. "Hayaten. Kokuryu Bofusetsu," the tyrant yelled, a black dragon forming from the surrounding ice and charging the blonde. Naruto looked at the incoming dragon. No way in hell was he getting hit by that. Coyuki heard the sound of a bell and a flash of green light. Dodo's eyes widened. His target was gone. Acting on instinct, he raised his left arm, blocking Naruto's kick. The blonde used Dodo's arm as a pivot to swing himself around and slashed down with his katana. The tyrant found a bloody furrow carved on his right forearm. Naruto jumped back. Dodo closed his left hand, coming out in a vicious jab. Naruto twisted, allowing the punch to pass him by harmlessly before burying his own fist in Dodo's gut. Spittle came out of the elder Kazahana's mouth as he was sent skidding backwards. Naruto closed, a roundhouse kick impacting on the black armored man's knee. His katana came in low, cutting across Dodo's thigh. Dodo's arm came out catching Naruto in the chin, sending him into the air. Naruto flipped, landing lightly on his feet. Naruto closed again. The bell sounded and Dodo found a blade carving open his back. He kicked out behind him. Naruto used the leg as a springboard to get above the dictator, before spinning in mid-air and delivering a punishing heel kick to the man's head. Dodo hit the still icy floor and his blood splashed over it. Naruto backed off. His plan was to hit and run. Whittle Dodo down bit by bit. That armor was dangerous. Now that he was out of Dodo's range, Naruto chose to indulge in some of the age-old art of trash talk. So what's wrong, Dodo? Your attacks aren't affecting me at all. What's wrong? Naruto made a face that held mock horror. Don't tell me that you've over-relied on your armor and your skills suck because of it. Don't tell me it's true, Dodo-chan. Naruto finished in a mocking tone. The tyrant picked himself off the ground and Naruto quickly got serious again. Dodo closed with him again. Naruto went to dodge and slipped on the ice. He gritted his teeth right before Dodo's fist found his face. The punch shattered the ice around him and sent Naruto into the water that the ice was coving. Dodo smiled. The child would die. The water was below freezing. There was no way his body could take that kind of temperature. He heard the sound of running across the ice and turned, but was not fast enough. In front of him was a furious Kasumi, tears streaming down her face, a Rasengan in each hand. The red head pulled back, the heart of a storm held in each of her hands. Rasengan. The twin Rasengans hit. Dodo's armor was cracked as he was sent flying. Kasumi's rage only increased when she saw the man pick himself up. This bastard had killed her brother. He was going to pay. She was going to make him pay. Dodo spat out blood. How dare that low-born redhead bitch make him bleed. The Kazuhana sped through hand seals. Hayaten. Soryu Bofusetsu. A pair of snow dragons rushed the Namikaze heiress, quickly combining together to form a large tornado that destroyed the surrounding area. Kasumi simply charged another Rasengan. Dodo was going to die. She would be damned if she let a jutsu like this stop her. Naruto sunk deeper into the water. Fuck, that punch had hurt. So that's it then? Asked a voice from within. You're happy just to let it end like this? Are you really happy to let it end like this? Naruto would have groaned if he wasn't underwater. The blonde angled himself for the surface. The sound of a bell reverberated around him as he shot upward. I knew you were better than that, Naruto. Well, we will see each other again one day, partner. The voice vanished. Naruto burst out of the water. He saw a tornado heading for Kasumi. The sound of a bell resounded over the battlefield and the black tornado split in half. Kasumi couldn't believe her eyes as Naruto landed in front of her, sword firmly in hand. The blonde turned a little and smiled at her. Good job, was all Naruto offered, but Kasumi knew the way he felt towards their family. For him to say good job to one of them was the same as anyone else congratulating her with all their hearts. She smiled back and nodded. Her tears were now those of happiness. Dodo looked at the boy before him and seethed in anger. How is he still alive? You little shit, I'll kill you. I'll make your death painful, you little bastard. Dodo promised. Naruto snickered before laughing uncontrollably. Dodo looked at him like he was insane. You call that a threat? Naruto asked, his mirth obvious in his tone. I have seen things far, far more frightening than you. I have spoken to a demon lord and insulted him to his face. Seen things would send a lesser man insane. Survived having my soul torn apart by something many call the king of demons. Naruto's voice changed from mirthful to cold. So tell me, why exactly should I be scared of you, little man? Naruto readied his katana. The next attack would end it. Naruto just hoped it would be enough. Dodo started on his hand signs. Naruto gathered his Riryoku. The blue light roared off him and ascended to the heavens, ripping apart the land around him and even erasing the clouds above. Dodo couldn't help but look on in awe. This was beyond human. Dodo completed his hand signs and took a deep breath. Hayaten. Soryu Bofusetsu. The dictator screamed. Black dragons roared and charged the blonde. Naruto closed his eyes. The wind for a brief second seemed to cease as the world itself seemed to stand still. Naruto breathed deeply, saturating his lungs with air. His sword was swung at the dragons and Dodo. Blue light roared from the blade, destroying everything in its path. The light tore through the dragons like a hot knife through butter, and as Dodo died he heard the name of the attack that ended his life. Naruto opened his mouth and shouted its name to the heavens. Getsuga Tenshou. The light died and all that was left was a smoking gouge in the earth. Naruto looked up and smiled at the sky above, God that had taken it out of him. The heat generators started in earnest, the area around them turning into a grassland. Kasumi looked around in shock as she saw the grassland and a butterfly. A butterfly? How the hell is there a butterfly? It was a wasteland a few seconds ago, wasn't it? The redhead asked no one in particular. A projection appeared in the center of the 7 glaciers, a young Coyuki. Believe in spring will come. The voice echoed around the clearing. Coyuki, what would you like to be when spring comes? Asked the voice. The young Coyuki scrunched up her face as she thought. Naruto gave a small chuckle. The blonde thought it looked cute. His hearing picked up as he felt Kasumi, Kushina and Erza come up behind him. Naruto could feel Kakashi, Sakura and Lee nearby. The young Coyuki smiled at someone they couldn't see. I'll become a princess. The younger Coyuki stated proudly. What kind of princess? The young Coyuki smiled even wider. A kind, strong one, a princess that believes in justice. Coyuki stated proudly. The voice chuckled. That is going to be very hard work. The voice replied, it did sound confident she could do it though. But if you don't give up and if you believe in your dreams, then one day for sure you will become one. The owner of the voice walked on screen. He was a rather tall man but with a plain face and brown hair. But his eyes seemed to radiate kindness and warmth. Can you see the very beautiful princess standing here? Naruto could see tears falling down Koyuki's face and walked over and put an arm around her. She gave him a brief look and smiled before turning back to the projection. Though Naruto did note that like when he carried her through the cave she did snuggle into him. But I am not quite decided yet. The younger Koyuki said, a giant smile on her face. There is one other thing I want to become. Oh really? The man asked, still smiling. And what might that be? The younger Koyuki smiled even wider. An actress, she declared proudly. The man laughed good-naturedly and so did Koyuki next to him. Naruto just smiled as he felt her snuggle into him a little more. Erza walked over to him and smiled. You know Naruto, you just managed to save a country and you're not even a ninja. Erza said good-naturedly. Naruto nodded, a smile on his face. You're right, with my clothing I feel more like a knight. Naruto said, chuckling. Erza gave him a coy expression. Well, I might not be an expert, but when a knight does things like this they tend to get a reward. Naruto opened his mouth to answer, but before he could say anything Erza kissed him. In front of everyone, the redhead's arms wrapped around his neck as Naruto's own wrapped around her waist. Every person watching them had their jaws on the floor with varying reactions. Kushina felt a small amount of motherly rage and the urge to stop the kiss, but far more pride at her son for landing what seemed like such a nice girl. Kasumi had a small, well maybe more than small, hint of jealousy and a blush on her face. Lee was ranting, internally thankfully, about Naruto's youth, and Sakura couldn't believe that someone would kiss the demon, but was wise enough not to voice her opinion, while Kakashi just giggled perversely. They broke and let their arms leave one another. Best day ever, Naruto stated in his mind, smiling at Erza, who smiled while a megawatt blush that would make Hinata jealous covered her face. Koyuki walked up behind him, a smile still etched on her lips. You know, I really thought you were going to die there for a second. The princess stated, and Naruto laughed. That is not going to happen. I wouldn't die from something like that. If I had time to die from an attack like that, I would rather not worry about death and try planning out a good life right until the very end. Koyuki smiled at Naruto's answer, before placing a hand on each of his shoulders. Erza was right, Naruto. Knights normally do get a reward for doing things like this. Koyuki stated deviously, before bringing her face a little closer to Naruto's own. But it usually comes from the princess by tradition. Koyuki closed the distance between them and kissed him deeply. Naruto could hear Kakashi's perverted laughter, but couldn't bring himself to care. His body broke down into partials of Riryoku as the two parted from their kiss. Best day ever, Naruto stated, a giant grin on his face even as he disappeared. Just as he vanished, everyone heard the blonde's last parting remark. This really was one hell of a happy ending. No one could disagree with him. 2 weeks later, after all the device was incomplete, Koyuki stated, causing Kasumi to frown. So it's going to be winter again? The inquisitive Namikaze asked. Koyuki shook her head. No, not at all, we will use that device, study it and then refine it. If we do that, then one day Yuki no Kuni will permanently become Haru no Kuni. Naruto smiled. That was good. Erza had a similar smile and her arm linked through his. But you know it's going to be a waste. Sakura spoke up. After all, you're so popular and now you'll have to quit acting. Oh, and who said I would stop acting? Coyuki asked. Erza disentangled her arm and walked over to stand next to Coyuki. As both the monarchy and actress of Yuki no Kuni, I will show that I can do both. After all, no one can choose how I should live but me, right? She finished smiling, then held up a very familiar green book to both Kakashi and Naruto. What could Naruto say? The fox when he was in control was a serious pervert. Still, those books really were works of art, goddammit. Kakashi looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Oh Naruto, one last thing, this is a present from Erza and myself. Coyuki said, handing over a sealed envelope. Naruto looked at it strangely. Well, Erza and I have to talk, so we'll see you later. Coyuki said, waving as she and Erza walked away. Naruto opened the envelope. Inside was a picture frame. He took a single look at it before wooting like a frat boy and running around pumping his fist in the air. A giant grin plastered over his face. Kasumi, naturally interested in what could have provoked such a response, tried to get a look at the photo only to have Naruto jump away, keeping it safely out of her reach. Kasumi didn't take this well, running after Naruto, the mayhem only increasing when Kasahina joined, more than a little suspicious of what that picture frame held. A well-placed chakra chain knocked it out of Naruto's hand and Kakashi scooped it up, took one look at it and had a giant grin on his face mirroring Naruto's own. Kakashi spun, throwing the picture to Naruto and jumping in front of the two Namikaze women, fully ready to give Naruto time to get away, in honor of his male comrade. Kakashi gave Naruto a salute before turning back to face Kasumi and Kushina. Go Naruto. You truly are a man amongst men. Kakashi declared, engaging the two female Namikaze in a heated taijutsu match. Naruto gave a salute to Kakashi in return. Thank you Kakashi, I will never forget your sacrifice. Naruto replied before jumping away in a flash of bringer light, taking the highly sought-after photo with him to find Coyuki and Erza. Said picture was of Erza and Coyuki both posing for a camera in white lingerie, with a pair of kisses on the corner and the words, "We don't mind sharing," scrawled across the bottom of the picture. Naruto took it back. This was the best day ever. A small ripple appeared in the air, it shifted and swirled before reforming. A man stood in the ripple's place, an orange mask over his face. His single visible Sharingan eye was radiating unbridled hate for the place before him. He looked over the sprawling village of Konoha, a village he hated with all his heart, and yet, could not be any more important in his plans. Yes, this feeling, this rage, pain and hate, how they still burned in him after all this time. He let loose a dry chuckle. The drama of this village really was just beginning, and how sweet would it be when he saw it die. He would laugh amongst its ashes and dine on the blood of his foes, though he would naturally give them chances to hurt him. Not seriously, but just enough that it gave them the illusion that they could win. He wanted to see the moment every last person in this pathetic village's life drained out of their eyes. To see them look at him and know that their hope was nothing but a pathetic illusion, one he could easily break. The man who called himself Madara shook his head. This was not the time to plan his revenge, no matter how sweet it may be. He had a task to perform here and now. The air rippled around his eye, drawing him in. It was time he went and recovered one of his most useful tools. The air rippled and the masked man once again took form. He stood over the war hawk's bed, the man on it sleeping soundly. He wasn't sure if the man considered himself a war hawk. Really, it didn't matter either way. He brought his hands up and ran through seals, activating an array caved into the man's very DNA. Madara was a little annoyed that he would never get his hands on the man's dependents. But only an Uchiha female could apply this seal, something engraved into the man's very flesh whilst he was still in the womb, leaving no discernible identification that it even existed. He finished his hand seals and the man's body glowed for a brief moment, intricate and interlocking black lines appearing over him. His hair turning pitch black, skin becoming paler, and the war hawk's eyes opened, showing 3 tomes on a red iris. The war hawk got out of his bed immediately, kneeling at the masked Madara's feet in submission. "What is your wish, Madara-sama?" he asked, loyalty alive in his tone. The masked man smiled. That was good, and his tool was still loyal to the cause. My wish is simple: begin to advance our objectives once again, but do not be obvious about it. He said, looking down at the man prostrated before him, which was good. One day the world would bow before him like a god, not like that fool Pain who was merely corrupted by the power of his Rinnegan, but a true god. The man nodded once. Of course, Madara-sama. The masked man nodded and ran through hand seals again. The man's body glowed and he fell to the floor unconscious. The air rippled and the masked Madara was gone. The Warhawk stood up looking around in a confused manner. When did he fall out of bed? He was a ninja, he should notice things like that. He shrugged, it probably wasn't important. The Warhawk crawled back into bed and closed his eyes. He would carry out his master's orders, even if he didn't know it. Day of return from the snow mission. The group of 6 walked into the Hokage's office, Tsunade still sitting behind her desk. She had asked Minato if he would take up the hat once more, but the blonde declined, saying that he wanted to speak with Naruto before he entertained the thought of being Hokage again. Still, it did give the busty blonde some hope that she may one day escape the dreaded curse of paperwork, that seemed to be the bane of all rulers. Her head came up, brown eyes coming face to face with the 6, 5 she knew and 1 she did not. The girl was quite pretty even in her current state, though the medic in Tsunade noted that she did look a bit malnourished. The blonde took a deep breath before sighing. Somehow she could tell this was going to be a long day. Team Kakashi, please report on the mission to guard Fujikaze Yuki to the land of snow, after which I would like Kushina to report on the secondary objective that Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto put forth. The busty Hokage asked, feeling like a headache was about to come on. She did wonder where Naruto was though, before discarding the thought, damned gem. The stupid thing would probably make him the world's best infiltrator. Now there was a thought. Kakashi took a deep breath. He could already tell that Tsunade wasn't going to like this. Well, Tsunade-sama, it turns out the mission was not quite as simple as we first assumed. Kakashi started with a nervous chuckle. Tsunade groaned, why? Why couldn't she have one day where things were simple? Upon arriving to Yuki no Kuni, the director began filming first on a giant iceberg off the coast. Stupid, I know, but he did it anyway. After they began shooting the first scene of the move, an explosion happened. 3 Yuki ninja, one of which was Roga Nadare, a man I had clashed with on my last visit to the country. Kakashi took a deep breath and thought back, making sure he didn't leave anything out. Roga revealed that Fujikaze Yuki was a fake name and that Yuki-san's real name was Kazuhana Coyuki, Princess of Yuki no Kuni, and the girl I helped escape the country 10 years ago. After that we engaged in battle. Myself against Roga, Sakura and Lee against a female ninja named Fubuki, and finally Kasumi against a man named Mizore. Kushina-sama hung back as support and so she could get involved where needed. After a few minutes we found our opponents were wearing chakra armor. Chakra armor? Tsunade inquired, looking at Kakashi strangely. The silver-haired Jonin nodded. He hated that stuff. Yes, Tsunade-sama, chakra armor. It is a kind of technology unique to Yuki no Kuni. The device itself not only increases the user's ability with both nin and genjutsu, but it also makes the wearer immune to genjutsu, and only high-powered ninjutsu have a chance of getting through it. Taijutsu, however, is exempt from this, as the armor only negates chakra-related attacks, not physical force, Kakashi stated. Tsunade looked at the silver-haired man with calculating eyes. Did you manage to retrieve a copy of this armor, Jonin Hitaki? Tsunade asked. She was no warhawk, but that armor could save the lives of many Konoha shinobi, if they could get their hands on it. Kakashi shook his head in a negative response. No, Tsunade-sama. I did ask about it when the mission was complete, but it turns out that the 4 suits that Doto and his 3 lackeys were wearing were the only sets. I also checked a few other places after the mission was complete, but it seems as if the information on the chakra armor and the scientists that built it were erased and the scientists were killed. The Jonin stated. Inside his crystalline prison, Naruto whistled innocently, while in the outside world Erza held in a smirk. Tsunade nodded. The council, both civilian and shinobi, was going to give Kakashi, Kushina and her hell over that. The blonde Hokage sighed. One day of peace, was that really too much to ask? Continue please, Kakashi. Let's just hope the council doesn't bitch too much over this. Kakashi nodded and took up his report where he left off. As I was saying, Hokage-sama, my team split up to deal with the Yuki ninja. After a brief battle with the Yuki ninja Mizore by Kasumi, Naruto saw fit to intervene. Tsunade couldn't hold back the look of surprise on her face when she heard that. Naruto? Really? Kakashi nodded. I was as surprised as you are, Hokage-sama, at any rate. Naruto chose to fight the Yuki ninja and told Kasumi to leave and help the others. To the best of my knowledge, Sakura and Lee were on the ropes at this point as their opponent could fly and they were finding it hard to attack her. When Kasumi and Kushina showed up, they saved Lee and Sakura. Naruto was still fighting Mizore at this point. After he had pushed Mizore back, Naruto and I found ourselves back to back. I told him that the Yuki ninja had too much of a home field advantage and we needed to retreat and regroup. He agreed and gathered the others before making for the boat. When they were all on board, I used Hayaten, Akaku Hikuge, to destroy part of the iceberg and ran. We arrived at port the following morning. Kakashi took a deep breath and rolled his shoulders. Things rapidly deteriorated from here. We decided to continue the mission, but the princess went missing. Luckily Naruto found her, became quite good friends with her as well. Kakashi added a perverted grin on his face, or what they could see of his face, while Erza gained a small dusting of crimson on hers. Kasumi and Kushina grimaced. They never did find out what was in that picture frame, but they could guess. After she was brought back, Dodo decided to take an active role in the proceedings, using a machine called a train. It was outfitted with various forms of weapons that were deadly enough to kill a large section of the Yuki rebellion in a very short amount of time. Through careful use of some explosive tags, we managed to disable and then destroy the train, though Coyuki was still taken hostage by Dodo, who returned in a vehicle called a blimp and captured her by air. The Hitaki looked at his leader and saw she was engrossed in his story, likely looking for a way for Konoha to benefit more. Not that it was a bad thing. That was what a Hokage was supposed to do after all. Look for the best way to benefit the village and the nation. Naruto acted quickly when this happened, hiding his own crystal with Coyuki so he could help her when needed. After Coyuki was taken, we decided to follow and ended up infiltrating Yukihana, the capital of Yuki no Kuni. The team and I rigged up some explosives as a distraction while Kushina and Kasumi went to rescue Coyuki and Naruto, who were being held in an underground lab at the time. They were successful, though some of the data stored there was damaged in their escape. Naruto also found the friend he talked about saving. Kakashi added, indicating Erza, who like the others had been silent until now. The blonde Hokage turned her attention to the girl in full. Red hair, much like the two Uzumaki in the room. It looked a little uncared for, but that seemed to be being changed quickly. Pale skin on the side of unhealthy, but seemed to be getting better. As she had noted earlier, the girl seemed to be slightly malnourished, but Kushina would be seeing to that, no doubt. The woman hated to see others suffering after all, and you are? Tsunade asked. Erza stepped forward, her head held high. Scarlet Erza, a very old friend to Naruto. She stated proudly. Tsunade looked her up and down again. This time she had a way to control the wild card. Tsunade was not proud of what she did, but she could not risk him attacking the leaf. It was her duty as Hokage to prevent that. Scarlet sounds like a strange name. From what side of your family did you receive it from? Tsunade questioned. Start slowly, that was the first step. Erza shook her head and gave a small smile. Naruto gave the name Scarlet to me in honor of my hair. He always did say it looked beautiful. I was almost raised in the lab Naruto and the others rescued me from. I was there from the age of 7. I don't have many memories before that, just flashes, nothing concrete. Erza admitted, looking a little put out by the fact. It was all an act, of course. Erza knew exactly what her life had been like before age 7, but they could not risk exposing their hand right now. The only real part had been the fact that Naruto gave her the last name Scarlet because of her hair. She threw away the name Uzumaki a long time ago. Maybe she would retake it one day, but not until he was dead. Kushina looked at her for a second, taking in her hair color, skin and eyes. Only the eyes were strange, for the rest she could have passed for an Uzumaki. Erza-san, the Namikaze matriarch started to ask, would you mind undergoing a blood test? I have an idea on what your last name may really be. Erza looked at her for a second before smiling. I would like that, Kushina-san, but Erza looked up at her sadly. You think I am an Uzumaki, don't you? Kushina looked taken aback, before nodding shakily. Was she really that easy to read that even a 14-year-old could do it? I do think that, she admitted. Your hair and skin color definitely match up, Erza-san. Only your eyes make me doubt if there is a link between you and the Uzumaki. I don't have much family left, but if you are family. Even if you are not, I would like to get to know you better. Kushina finished with a smile that looked like it was about to break in half. Tsunade took this as an opportunity. Feeling mildly disgusted with herself as she did so, but it was her duty and so she continued. Actually, I have an offer I would like to extend to you, Erza-san. The Sannin started. She would have to tread carefully. I can tell from the way you feel that you can use chakra. I would like to extend an offer for you to become a Konoha shinobi, with that we see a. Tsunade stop. Kushina's voice cut through Tsunade's own. The busty cage looked up at the furious redhead. The cage looked annoyed at the interruption. I'm sorry, Kusina, did the middle of my sentence interrupt the beginning of yours? The blonde Hokage asked sarcastically. Kushina just looked angrier, if that was even possible. Do you honestly think I don't see what you're trying to do, Tsunade? Kushina hissed out at the blonde cage. Tsunade just looked on impassively. Trust Kushina to know exactly what she was doing. I have no idea what you are talking about, Kushina. I was only going to offer the girl a place as a Konoha shinobi. You know as well as I do that shinobi get priority treatment at the hospital and better access to the medic ninja stationed there. I am a medic at heart, Kushina. I want the girl to get better as fast as possible, and the best way to do that is have medic ninja helping her. The best way for me to do that is for Erza to become a Konoha shinobi. So that the old bats on the council will not throw a fit about me treating an outsider before our own. Moreover, if Erza-san is not a civilian, then their half of the council cannot act against her. Tsunade stated, not backing down from the challenge in the redhead's eyes. And I suppose that having Erza-chan as a shinobi under your command is just a bonus then? Kushina asked sarcastically, while rage smoldered beneath the surface of her violet blue eyes. I have no idea what you mean, considering the girl can use chakra and, I assume, helped you fight your way out of Yuki. I have no doubt she is competent. But I doubt that Erza-san would be more special than the other ninja we posses. That is no insult to you, Erza-san, but we do have many highly trained jonin. Tsunade countered Kushina's accusation, and the redhead seemed to grow even more furious. And I suppose the fact that she would be a shinobi under your command and give you the ability to collar and control Naruto should it need to happen has nothing to do with your decision, Tsunade? Kushina spat at the blonde. Tsunade sighed in a tired manner. I would be lying if I said it didn't, Kushina. Tsunade admitted no point in trying to hide it now the redhead had pushed it into the open. Besides, she didn't like manipulating people anyway. She did it, that did not mean she liked it. But do you think I like doing this, Kushina? Do you really think I enjoy this? I will admit that should it come down to it, then I would and will use Erza-san in that way. However, you saw the kind of power Naruto possesses. I as Hokage cannot let him turn it against the village, don't you understand, Kushina? I may not like what I have to do as Hokage, but I can and will do it to keep the village safe. You saw how hostile he was to Konoha, held to you and Minato. I cannot let someone with that much power and that much hate reside within Konoha without a means to control them or at the very least limit the amount of damage they could cause. Tsunade stated firmly, gritting her teeth. You can't or you won't, Tsunade? Kushina asked lowly. Both, the slug Sannin admitted, looking slightly ashamed by her admittance. Tsunade, don't you understand what you're doing? If you keep pushing Naruto like this, then he can and will snap. When that happens, he will attack the leaf. Why can't you see that what we need to do is treat him with respect and try to earn his in return? That is the only way you and the leaf are going to be able to, as you said, keep him under control, by treating him as a human being and not a weapon. Respect him, and Tsunade, he may well respect you. Kushina finished. That wasn't some no-brain idea. That was what she had seen Naruto act like. She may not know her eldest well. She didn't know him at all really. But she could already tell that he had principles that he would not break, and pushing him like Tsunade and the council, both of them, were trying to do would only make Naruto their enemy in the long run. Well, more so than he was at the moment anyway. Naruto was closer to ambivalent hate towards the leaf. If they pushed him, Naruto may well take an active part in the village's destruction. Tsunade looked up at her. I am trying to do the best I can with what I have, Kushina. You say I should try and earn his respect. Okay, let's say I do that. Despite what you may think, that will not be enough for the council. They will keep trying to find a way to control him or kill him. If I can give them a way to control him and keep it so that only the Hokage can use it, such as making Erza-san a shinobi, then I can offer Naruto a degree of protection from the council, both civilian and shinobi sides, and I can offer Konoha a degree of protection from him, like I am supposed to do. I do not like that I have to manipulate people, Kushina, but I will do it if I need to. Kushina growled at the blonde. It was a primal sound. You want to control him? The redhead asked, almost hissing at the blonde. Tsunade, you make it sound like he's nothing but a weapon. Naruto is a human with feelings and emotion. Hell, he even has a morale code. If you think I am going to stand by and let you turn my child into Konoha's personal attack dog, you have another thing coming. Your child, Kushina? Tsunade asked, a slight amount of mockery in her tone. The blonde cage's anger and impatience at the situation quickly making themselves apparent. Yes, of course he is your child. After all, you were there to be a mother for him after all. The Hokage replied sarcastically, not really thinking about her words. Kushina went silent as Tsunade's words washed over her. Tsunade looked at the redhead in horror, her brain finally catching up with her mouth. Kushina, I am sorry, I didn't mean it to come out like that. Tsunade said to her friend, looking ashamed at her own lack of control. No, Tsunade, you are right. Kushina admitted, sounding ashamed of herself. I wasn't there to be a mother to Naruto. Hell, he won't even let me call him my son. But I can't argue with him for that, Tsunade. I saw all the hospital files from before he was 7. I left my child here and he almost died because of it. My child was taken away from me because of a man who wanted to be a hero by stopping the Kyuubi and sealed that thing into Naruto. When I found out the sealing went wrong, I couldn't even look at him, and because of the pain that it brought us both, Minato and I left our child here to die, taking Kasumi away to be raised in a good home, while Naruto had nothing. When I found out that the seal didn't fully break until he was 7, words cannot describe how disgusted I was with myself for leaving my baby here. But at least I am trying to make it up to him. I may have lost my home and my family when Uzu was destroyed, and I thought that I lost my baby when the sealing went wrong. But at least I am trying to help him. I don't care if Naruto never calls me mother, no matter how much I want it. I don't even care if he never lets me call him Sochi. I just want to do right by my child now, Tsunade. Can you understand that? I will keep trying to help him until Naruto feels I have repented for my sin. We might never have a family bond, but at the very least I will make sure that I help my son this time, Tsunade. I won't let this village take him away from me again. For the first time in his life I am going to do right by baby Tsunade. Kushina's sadness was slowly turning to rage. Rage against the injustice her son had suffered. Because of her, because of this village, and now because of the woman in front of her that was supposed to be his godmother. Kushina wasn't a mother to Naruto when he was younger, but at the very least she was trying now. Tsunade wasn't even doing that. Tsunade, I may not know much about my child. I'm honestly not even sure I have the right to call Naruto my child. Kushina admitted, ignoring the pain inside her heart as she said that. But I have learned one thing about him. Treat him with respect and he will do the same to you. It may be grudging respect. Naruto may even hate to give you respect, but at least he would give it. Naruto may have actually raised himself to be a better man than Minato, and I could have raised him to be. A hollow laugh filled with pain accompanied that statement. You, Tsunade, have done absolutely nothing for him. Not once. You haven't acknowledged that you abandoned him just like we did. You're his godmother, so you're just as guilty as Jiraiya is. I will admit that the four of us, Minato, Jiraiya, you and me, did not take care of him. At that point in time we thought the seal had failed, so it was only natural that none of us wanted to be around him. I won't blame you for that. It's understandable, and I am just as guilty of that sin as you are. What I will blame you for, what I will get angry about, is that you haven't acknowledged that you've wronged him in any way. You haven't even so much as treated him with the respect due him as a human being. And frankly, I'm as disgusted as I believe Naruto to be with how you're treating what's been done to him. Tsunade, you act like nothing had ever happened and that you're completely innocent in all of this. Well, something did happen. You're just as guilty as the rest of us, and now Minato, Jiraiya, you and I have a responsibility to make up for it in any way we possibly can. Kushina took a deep breath and returned to speaking in an even tone. Tsunade, you are just as much a part of Naruto's abandonment as the rest of us were. I know you have lost people in the past. Hell, you spent years after Dan and Nawaki died running from this village. Tsunade, you're running again right now by refusing to take your part in this seriously. To be honest with you, Tsunade, at the moment I think you are a coward. Look at Kakashi. he lost more than you ever did to this village and he managed to pull himself back together. After his father and Obito died and Rin went missing, Kakashi pulled himself back together. He may have some quirky and eccentric ways of dealing with his problems, but is just a Tsunade. At least Kakashi deals with them, and not just runs away like you did when Dan and Nawaki died, like you are still trying to do now. Kushina stated to the blonde cage venom in her tone. Tsunade looked taken back by the amount of emotion Kushina was displaying. That and the fact no one had ever said that to her, not even Jiraiya when he was angry, but Jiraiya's anger was like a drop of rain compared to the ocean in comparison to what Kushina's anger was like right now. I know Tsunade, believe me I know, I'm in largely the same boat you are with being responsible for the atrocities committed against Naruto. But do you know what the difference between you and me is? It's that I've acknowledged my part in it, and I'm trying to redeem myself to him as best I can. You're acting like it never happened, and you're demanding respect that you frankly don't deserve. Think about it for a second, Tsunade. To Naruto we have done nothing for him. For what reason should he show Konoha, me, you, anyone a form of respect? Maybe if you showed him a little humility, he might not be so hostile towards you. He regards you as an enemy right now, and why shouldn't he? Hell, what has the Leaf done to stop Naruto regarding all of you as his enemies, myself and my husband included? You're behaving no differently than Danzo would towards him. Kushina finished shouting at the blonde cage, who was almost shaking. If it was rage or remorse Naruto couldn't tell, but it was the time for him to intervene. But before he could, Kushina spoke again. Tsunade, Kakashi so far has treated Naruto with the respect he is due as a human being, and from what I've seen he responds to that and in turn treats Kakashi with respect. Could you at least try to bend that stiff neck of yours and show him some humility? If you do, Naruto may actually be willing to have a civil conversation with you, despite his grievances against the Leaf and you. Hell, if you do that you may actually have a chance in hell of keeping him inside Konoha despite his hate of the vast majority of its people. Kushina finished. Tsunade took a deep breath. Earn his respect? That would not be good enough for the council, they would want more, but Kushina was right. She wouldn't be able to build anything without it. Kakashi took a deep breath. His Hokage might not like what Kushina was saying to her, but she needed to hear it. The silver-haired Jonin took a deep breath. It seemed it was his turn to advise his Hokage. Kushina has a very good point, Tsunade-sama, the one-eyed pervert stated. Naruto has no reason to be friendly to me, but so far every time I treated him with civility and some respect I got it in return. At times it was grudging, at times I could tell he hated giving me a form of respect with every fiber of his being, but he gave it anyway, provided I did so first. I may not know too much about Naruto's abandonment. I haven't asked Minato-sensei or Kushina what happened that night, but Naruto did seem to treat me with respect if I gave it first. I honestly agree with Kushina, Tsunade-sama. If you wish to have a civil conversation with Naruto or even a chance in hell of keeping him inside Konoha, your first step should be to earn his respect. Kakashi finished, somehow sounding both stern and lazy at the same time. Naruto shook his head from within his gem. That had to be some kind of special skill. Either way, it was about time for him to step in. After all, the old hag was going to be looking to put a collar on him one way or the other. Might as well be a collar with the best terms possible on his part. Riryoku moved lazily around Erza, not its usual maelstrom of power. Then again, Naruto didn't need his battle form right now, so he could conserve his energy. The blonde's body took form: black combat boots, pants, a dark blue undershirt and a red coat that went down to mid-ankle. The blonde yawned. While manipulating his clothing was one of the first things he had figured out about his prison. All he had to do inside was will the clothing to exist, and it would. It was much the same when he came outside. He just had to will the clothing to exist as he exited the gem. He didn't know if he had some kind of default clothing when he exited the gem, but it was quite likely he could come out naked. He really wasn't keen to try that. The blonde alighted on the floor, standing tall before the two arguing women. His mind working a mile a minute. How could he best use this situation? Tsunade wanted to control him. Kushina wouldn't let that happen, thankfully. But the hag was right. In order to calm the council down, she would need to have some kind of collar on him. As long as she didn't have that, he was in danger, but more importantly so was Erza. So you and the old bastards want a way to collar me if I should prove to be unfriendly to the Leaf, is that right, hag? Naruto questioned the surprised-looking Tsunade, who nodded uncertainly. But how did Naruto know that he wasn't in the room at the time? The blonde chose to throw the cage a bone. If you're wondering how I knew that, he smiled, I can hear everything nearby when I'm inside the gem. The blonde said, smirking at the busty cage who had admitted to trying to control him. He didn't really begrudge her for that. In her position he would be trying to do the same. What if I told you I had a solution that made everybody happy? Naruto asked, a smile tugging at his lips. Tsunade cocked her head to the side. I'm listening. The blonde cage replied, genuine interest in her tone. Well then, old hag. Stop calling me an old hag brat. She wasn't really angry about it. The response was more automatic than anything else. Earn my respect and I'll think about it. Until then you're just another person who helped kill my body. Remember that, Tsunade. The blonde hissed at the cage, who gulped. The rage behind those eyes was inhuman. Seeing there would be no more interruptions, Naruto chose to continue. Now then, my idea is quite simple. Hire on Erza and myself as mercenaries attached to the Hidden Leaf Village but not technically a part of it. The Hokage looked at the blonde for a second. And why should I do that? It's obvious you care for Erza, and with me here Konoha has the best medical care in the elemental nations. You're not going to take her away from that. Tsunade countered. Naruto smiled. It was not a happy look. He knew it was just how bargaining went. That didn't make him any happier about it. True that Konoha has the best healthcare in the elemental nations right now. But the doctors hate me and by extension anyone connected to me. There is no guarantee that they would treat Erza the way they should. Hell, there is more of a chance that they would deliberately try to make the situation worse. So tell me why Erza and I should stay here for the healthcare when it would likely be subpar deliberately? Naruto asked. Tsunade grimaced. I would take care of her myself, brat. You cannot argue that I am the best medic in the elemental nations right now. I can and will take better care of Erza-san than anyone else. Tsunade replied. Naruto laughed in her face. You are telling me of all people to entrust someone who is responsible for almost causing my death to trust them with the life of the person I care about above all others. Tell me you are joking, you old hag, or are you just senile? Naruto replied, venom in his tone. Tsunade grimaced. Fine then, why should I allow you and Erza to be only mercenaries when the Shinobi Council want you under their direct command? The blonde cage sighed. Well, to be more precise, the council wants you under their command jointly with me. I want you as my direct subordinate, Tsunade admitted. Inside Konoha, the Shinobi Council could assign missions when they needed to, provided they had a majority vote on the mission. By having Naruto under their direct control, or at least as direct as it could be while sharing control of the shinobi forces with the Hokage, the council would effectively gain an enforcer that could reputedly slay a Biju. Then came the backdoor politicking. That would be what killed Naruto in the end. Naruto smiled. Now she was ready to play ball. Good. Simple to start with. You will actually keep me inside the village instead of leaving it. Tsunade grimaced. You wouldn't leave, despite the fact you hate the leaf. There were people here who were kind to you before the Kyuubi took you over. What do you have outside these walls, Naruto? From what I understand, you do not have anything, so where would you go? Tsunade asked. Naruto nodded. It was a fair question. I still have people here that treated me well before Kyuubi took over, yes. Are there enough of them to keep me in this village indefinitely without some sort of compensation? No. If you don't agree to this, I will leave. As for where would I go, how about Iwa, Kumo, or hell even Kiri? I know they are not out of the bloodline wars yet, but I am sure they could use the extra help. Moreover, I am very good friends with Coyuki, the current ruler of Yuki no Kuni, though I do believe it has been renamed Haru no Kuni now. But that is beside the point. I am sure that she would not mind hosting me. Naruto finished smiling viscously. Tsunade had on a calm face as she nodded and absorbed the information that had just been given to her. Tsunade held up her hands, a small sign of surrender. Okay, fine. What are your terms? The blonde asked. That's good, you're at least willing to listen, Naruto stated, sighing. First, you need to know some things. One, I know that the other major villages each have their own Jinchuriki, only the leaf does not. The only thing keep you safe right now is the fact that you have someone that can kill Biju on your side. Lose me and the other villages will come down on your head like a fucking avalanche. Tsunade, the fact of the matter is, you need me a lot more than I need you, and I know it. So you have far less leverage in this conversation and contract agreements than you originally thought. Do not push for something too big. Fine, what are your terms to this contract? Tsunade asked, a certain amount of tired resignation in her tone. Naruto smiled. Now that wasn't so hard, was it? The blonde asked sarcastically. Tsunade growled. Get on with it, brat. The blonde cage hissed out at the child in the seat before her. Kushina was in a slight bit of awe. Her child was playing Tsunade like a goddamn virtuoso. My demands are both simple and non-negotiable, so don't even try. The first is that Erza receives top-of-the-line medical care. You are to spare no expense. Tsunade nodded. She would need to clear that with the council, but that could be done, and not that she had a choice. Second, you are to give Erza and myself a place to live in the residential district. A good place to live, Tsunade. Furniture and fridge already fully stocked when we arrive. That particular demand is to be met by 6 p.m. or 1800 today. The Hokage looked at the clock. It was around noon. That was going to be close, but it could be done. Thirdly, neither Erza nor I will be registered as Konoha shinobi. We are to be a mercenary force under your direct control. If we ever think up a decent name for our merry band of misfits, I'll let you know. Unless you, the Hokage, order us, we have to do nothing. Even then your control is limited. The only orders we will obey without questions are to come to your office. Other than that, all we will do is hear you out. Tsunade nodded. So far there was nothing that was too hard to her to acquire for them. For missions you can prohibit from taking over a C rank if you wish, but we can choose to turn down any mission you attempt to give us. The prohibition on missions, should you wish it, should make the council worry less about us taking too much of your income revenue. We also choose our own missions. You can tell us what to choose from, but you cannot tell us what we may or may not take, unless you have a valid reason for it. You may however offer us specific missions should the need arise. We do retain the ability to turn them down though. Another clause is that if one of us goes missing, the other is to be equipped with a team that is capable of not only tracking them down but rescuing them if needed. In addition to this team, any shinobi that wishes to join the mission cannot be forbidden to, by the council or the Hokage. This contract will be valid for 3 years, after that we will need to review and renew it, but we can leave if we wish once the contract is up. For the duration of this contract, neither Erza nor myself will join another village. However, once our contract is up, we have no such restriction. In addition to this, should we find others that we wish to recruit into our merry band of misfits, we are allowed to do so, but the opposite party has to agree. We cannot force them to join us. Finally, we can be trained if we should wish it by the ninja of this village. We cannot force them to train us, but neither can you or the council stop a ninja should they wish to instruct us. Naruto finished sighing. Tsunade looked at him for a second before letting loose a sigh of her own. She had already seen all the pros and cons of Naruto's contract. It was heavily in the blonde's favor, but that really didn't matter too much. As Naruto had said earlier, they needed him more than he needed them. If that is what it takes, Naruto, then so be it. I take it that you wish for your connection to Erza-san to be hidden until such a time as she can defend herself? Tsunade asked, though it was more of a statement. Naruto nodded. I would be most appreciative if that were the case, Hokage-sama. It was amazing how much Naruto could make the words Hokage-sama sound like fuck you. The blonde's eyes lit up as he just realized something. Oh, and I want to be paid for that mission we took to Yuki as well. Tsunade nodded. You do realize that we will have to tell the doctors that heal her about your connection? The blonde asked, before elaborating. I take it the girl has your gem. If they see you appear out of mid-air, then they may panic. I will have to tell them about you. Tsunade stated. If the medics panicked, people would die. Tsunade would not allow that. Naruto nodded grudgingly. Fine, but let them know that if they try something, it will be a one-way trip to hell for them. Naruto smiled at her sadistically. Tell them I will send them personally. Tsunade nodded, her head already pounding. Fine, I agree to your terms. I will have the contract drawn up later today. You and Erza can sign it when you come and pick up your apartment key. Come by around 6, I can have everything ready by then. Kakashi just put the rest in a written report. I want it on my desk in 2 days. Now all of you, get out. The 7 walked out of the office, leaving behind a frustrated Tsunade. Naruto turned to walk off with Erza in a completely different direction to the others. Kushina turned to walk away with the others, feeling dejected. She really was trying to make it up to her child, and she would keep trying no matter how long it took. But even after what she had said inside Tsunade's office, he wouldn't even offer her a goodbye. The Namikaze matriarch turned to follow her daughter and the others before feeling a light flick on the back of her head. Kushina turned around to see Naruto standing in front of her, his face somewhat torn between anger and something else. She guessed you could call it happiness. The blonde scratched his head before sighing. Naruto came forward, his arms wrapped around her, almost mechanically, but Kushina guessed he was doing the best he could. The redhead's brain had shorted, her child was hugging her, something she had honestly never thought would happen. Naruto's hug felt almost mechanical, but Kushina guessed there was still a lot of pent-up resentment towards her and him. Still, she was being hugged. She may really have a chance after all. Naruto placed his mouth near her ear. "Thank you." It was quiet, less than even a whisper, but they were still the first kind words Naruto had ever said in regards to her. The blonde unwrapped his arms from around Kushina's waist and disappeared in a flash of light, the sound of a bell accompanying him. Kushina felt a single tear course down her face. It was a tear of happiness. 2 weeks after snow mission. Outside it was dead silent. The apartment was dark and it seemed nobody would be awake. That is why one would be surprised if they entered only to find a blonde teenager sitting on the couch in full battle attire. Naruto sat still as a statue, blade bare across his lap, eyes closed, breathing regular. He was deep in meditation. He was waiting. This was a problem that needed to be dealt with now. That was why he had allowed those morons from the council to move the Anbu patrols and pretended not to notice. Naruto didn't like this plan. That being said, Naruto didn't like anything that had the potential to put Erza in danger. Still, they had spent the last 2 weeks of being inside Konoha planning it out. This was a problem that needed to be dealt with sooner rather than later. No one inside Konoha knew that Erza could enter another's mind. Originally Naruto had believed it to be a bloodline. He had been wrong. Erza had been experimented on as a child, not by Yuki. No, Yuki had come into it far, far later. The original experiments were carried out by her father, the Tower of Heaven project. To put the tower in perspective, it was similar to a gigantic relay system, except instead of dealing with radio waves and the like, the tower dealt with human brainwaves. In layman's terms, every human had a single brainwave that was the same. The basis of the Tower of Heaven was that they could use that single brainwave to locate where people were. In theory, it was supposed to act as something like an early warning system, but over time that changed. The research got darker. Instead of just finding out where people were, it branched out into being able to go inside their heads from anywhere. Kind of like a Yamanaka technique without the distance limit. It would make for the ultimate spies or infiltrators. Then the research got darker again. Moving into the domination of the mind via use of the tower. The scary part was that it was possible, theoretically at least. But they needed 2 things for that to succeed. The first was a power source that could sustain a massive output for an extended period. The second was a living person that had enough power over the artificial bloodline to visit other people's mind without the need to be physically within the tower. In other words, they needed a Jinchuriki and Erza. According to the information Erza had managed to obtain, they got the Jinchuriki 3 weeks ago. Which meant they would be coming for her next, tonight to be exact. Naruto sheathed the blade and looked at the necklace containing a mixture of his own energy and Erza's. It made the thing into a kind of long-distance homing device. He could pinpoint where Erza was and she could do the same to him. It would be instrumental in their plan. The blonde looked around the apartment. It wasn't a large affair, but neither was it a small one. 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom and combined kitchen, living and dining. Ah, the wonders of blackmail. Naruto reclined into the chair a little more. The Anbu were almost entirely gone now. Erza was already asleep and he had maybe 30 minutes until the game began. Naruto closed his eyes again and yawned, before he stood. His blade was drawn. He could feel them getting closer. It looked like the plan was about to start in earnest. A vicious smile graced his face. He just hoped it worked.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.